Imagine trying to assassinate a kid and instead birthing the final boss of reality. Naruto became the king in black and said screw your will of fire. He turned the moon black, turned every Kage into his puppets, and then swallowed the entire universe. Celestials? Dead. Otsutsuki? Dinner. Light itself? Cancelled. This story is unhinged as fuck.
The torches went out one by one. 8-year-old Naruto Uzumaki hung in chains at the center of the cavern, 50 meters beneath the foundation of Konoha's military district, in a place that existed on 0 maps and belonged to 0 official records. The stone walls sweated moisture. The air tasted like copper and mildew and something older than both. Above him, the weight of an entire village pressed downward, and beneath him, the floor was inscribed with sealing formulas that had taken Danzo Shimura's best calligraphers 3 weeks to paint. Danzo stood at the edge of the seal circle. His one visible eye tracked the boy's hanging body with the detachment of a man inspecting a malfunctioning tool. Behind him, arranged in 3 concentric rings, stood 47 root Anbu, masked, armed, breathing in synchronized rhythm. Each of them carried a chakra-conducting blade. Each of them had killed at least 30 people in service to this man's vision. "Begin," Danzo said. The first blade entered from behind, straight through the kidney. A second followed immediately, through the left lung, a third, a fourth. The blades punched through Naruto's body from every angle, each one driven by an operative trained since childhood to destroy with a single thrust. 7 blades total. Enough force, enough penetration, enough destruction to end a jonin 3 times over. Naruto's head hung forward. His blonde hair covered his face. His small body sagged in the chains. Danzo watched. He waited for the Nine-Tails chakra to surge, for the seal to destabilize, for the window he needed to extract the beast before the vessel expired. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. Kill the boy, harvest the weapon, reshape Konoha's future with the fox chained to his will, rather than wasted inside an orphan. Blood dripped from the wounds. It was black. Danzo's eye widened. That single expression, that fracture in the mask of a man who had spent 60 years training every muscle in his face to betray nothing, was the first sign that something had gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. The blood was black, thick and viscous, the consistency of tar, and it moved. It crept down Naruto's torso, down his legs, pooled on the stone beneath his feet, and it spread, outward, in every direction. The sealing formulas on the floor began to distort as the black substance rolled over them. The painted lines warped, twisted, and vanished, consumed, erased, as though they had never been inscribed at all. "Withdraw the blades," Danzo ordered. The Anbu pulled. The blades came free, but they came free wrong. The steel was corroding, blackening from the point of entry outward, the metal softening and dripping in thick strings that joined the spreading pool on the floor. 7 chakra-conducting weapons, each worth more than a year's salary for a chunin, reduced to liquid black in under 4 seconds. The torches died, every single one, simultaneously. 47 Anbu operatives and one of the most dangerous men in the shinobi world stood in absolute blackness. The kind of blackness that presses against the eyes. The kind that makes the body understand on an instinctive level that predates language, that it has entered the territory of something that hunts. And in that blackness, 2 points of light appeared. They were red, spiraling, slow rotating like the pupils of something waking up after an eon of sleep. They hovered where Naruto's face had been, but higher now, rising, ascending, as though the boy's body had lifted free of the chains and floated upward. The chains snapped. Each link blackened and crumbled simultaneously. Iron turned to shadow, falling away like ash from a dead fire. The sound was wet, organic, wrong. Then the voice came. It arrived from every direction at once, from the walls, from the ceiling, from the floor, from inside the chests of every person standing in that cavern. It was layered, a child's voice underneath something so old and deep that the stone itself seemed to vibrate in response. You reached into the void, and the void reached back. Light bloomed in the cavern, but it was the wrong kind. A red glow emanating from the spiraling eyes and from a sigil that was forming on the boy's chest. A dragon, blood red, burning like a brand pressed into the skin of reality itself. The Anbu moved. They were root. They were trained beyond fear, beyond hesitation, beyond the instinct to flee. 14 of them rushed the floating figures simultaneously, chakra blazing in their palms, hands forming seals at speeds that would blur in a normal person's vision. The black pool on the floor surged upward, tendrils thick, fast, and alive, erupted from the ground and caught the charging Anbu mid-stride. One operative was seized by the throat and slammed into the ceiling with enough force to crater stone. Another was wrapped entirely, head to toe, in black substance that hardened around him like a coffin. 3 more were pulled downward into the pool itself, their bodies sinking into what should have been a solid stone floor, their screams muffled and then silent. The remaining Anbu froze. They could hear their comrades being consumed, the wet sounds, the cracking, the brief strangled attempts at screaming that cut off one by one. Inside the seal, something far worse was happening. Kurama had known power his entire existence. 9 tails of pure destruction, enough chakra to reshape landscapes, the memory of the Sage of 6 Paths, the experience of 1,000 years of rage and imprisonment. He had faced Madara Uchiha and survived. He had weathered the chains of Kushina Uzumaki. He had endured seal after seal, cage after cage, and through all of it, his fury had never dimmed. He pressed against the bars of the seal now with every shred of that fury. His tails crashed like tsunamis against the walls of the mindscape. His fire blazed so hot that the water on the floor evaporated into steam. His teeth bared, his eyes burned, and his voice shook the mental plane with a roar that carried the weight of centuries. Something was coming. He could feel it approaching through the mindscape, a presence so vast and so ancient that for the first time in 900 years, the 9-tailed fox experienced something he refused to name. The water on the floor turned black. It happened instantly. The entire mindscape, the sewer, the pipes, the cage, the water, all of it shifted. The water became ink. The walls became obsidian. The ceiling vanished into an abyss that stretched upward forever. And from that abyss, Naruto descended. He looked different. His body was wrong, too tall for an 8-year-old. His skin had gone bone white. His hair had lengthened and whitened and moved as though underwater. His eyes were void black pits with those red spirals turning. And behind him, spreading outward from his shoulders and back, an ocean of living shadow, a substance that was older than chakra, older than the Biju, older than the sage who created them. Kurama unleashed everything. 9 tails struck simultaneously, each one carrying enough force to level a mountain range, each one burning with concentrated chakra that could turn steel to vapor. The tails hit the shadow mass behind Naruto and stopped. They did not bounce. They did not impact. They simply stopped. The shadow swallowed them, consumed the force, consumed the chakra, consumed the fire, and then it moved up Kurama's tails. Fast. Black sludge that climbed like it was alive because it was alive, racing up the length of each tail simultaneously, coating fur and flesh in seconds. Kurama thrashed. He yanked backward with all 9 tails, and the shadow stretched with him. Elastic, relentless, hungry. What are you? The 9-tails voice came out smaller than it had been in centuries. Naruto walked forward across the black water. Each step was silent. His red spiral eyes never blinked. I am what was here before the sage drew his first breath, before the 10 tails split, before chakra was given a name. I watched the first light enter this world, and I felt it burn, and I declared war on it. Your creator's creator was a child when I was already ancient. The shadow reached Kurama's body. It poured over his chest, his legs, his neck. The fox thrashed violently, crashing against walls that no longer existed, clawing at a floor that had become an abyss, biting at the substance crawling up his throat. His chakra blazed. He concentrated everything into a single Biju bomb at point-blank range and fired it directly into the approaching blackness. The explosion was enormous. In the physical world, if unleashed, it would have flattened the entire Leaf Village. In the mindscape, it tore reality apart for a brief, beautiful instant of pure orange fire. The fire went out, consumed, eaten. The shadow mass that had momentarily compressed around the explosion now expanded again, larger than before, fed by what it had eaten, stronger for the meal. It climbed Kurama's skull. It poured into his open, screaming mouth. It filled his lungs like drowning in tar. You are a beast born of chakra, Naruto's voice said, and it was everywhere in the mindscape now, emanating from the substance itself. Chakra is light given form, and light does not survive in the void. Kurama's scream became a gurgle. The shadow filled his throat, his belly, his mind. He could feel it in his thoughts, erasing, rewriting, claiming. His fire died, his rage died. His identity, 900 years of fury and pride and defiance, drowned beneath something so much older and so much hungrier that resistance was a joke. A genuine cosmic joke. The great fox's eyes went blank. Then they opened again, void black, red spirals. The cage did not break. It simply ceased to be relevant. The bars, the seal, the entire structure, unnecessary. Kurama belonged to something now. He belonged to the void. The first symbiote dragon opened its new eyes inside the seal. 9 tails, each one coated in living shadow. A body that was still massive, still powerful, still carried the chakra of the mightiest Biju, but all of it now in service to something that made the 9 tails look like a puppy. In the physical cavern, Danzo's breathing had become audible. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the sounds of his ambu dying in the blackness around him. He could hear the wet, organic sounds of something spreading across stone, consuming everything it touched. He had contingencies. He always had contingencies. His right arm held stolen Sharingan eyes. His body carried forbidden sealing formulas. He was Danzo Shimura, the man in the shadows, the architect of a hidden empire, the one who made the decisions that Hokage were too weak to make. He bit his thumb and pressed his hand to the ground. Summoning. A hand closed around his throat. It was small, a child's hand, but the grip was absolute. The fingers were bone white, and from between them, black substance leaked and crawled across Danzo's neck like living vines. He was lifted off the ground with zero effort, his feet dangling, his one visible eye staring into 2 void black pits with red spirals turning in their depths. "You came here believing you could kill a god," the voice said. It was Naruto's voice, and it was something else. Layers beneath layers, an echo from the bottom of an ocean that had existed before the ocean was born. You brought blades to the void, steel to the abyss, light to the endless black. Danzo's hand moved. His stolen Sharingan eyes blazed, Izanagi activating, reality itself bending to his will, the supreme genjutsu that could rewrite the moment of his own death. The eye on his arm crumbled to dust mid-activation. The socket where it had sat filled with black sludge that sealed it permanently. Reality refused to bend for him. The void was older than reality. What Izanagi rewrote, the abyss had already written first. "The light is an infection," Naruto said, "and I am the cure." He reached into the air beside him with his free hand. Into nothing. Into shadow. What came back was a sword. It emerged from the blackness like a fin emerging from still water, long, impossibly black, radiating an anti-presence that made the air around it scream. It was the absence of color rendered solid, a blade forged from the very first shadow, tempered in the death of the first god, and sharpened against the spine of reality, until reality learned to part around its edge rather than suffer contact. All black, the Necrosword. The weapon was alive. It hummed at a frequency below hearing. Something felt in the marrow, in the spine, in the place where the body kept its understanding of danger. It sang. A one-note song that said, "This is the end of everything you think protects you." Danzo opened his mouth. To speak, to bargain, to threaten. To do what he had done his entire life. Maneuver, manipulate, survive. The sword moved. It moved at a speed that light could not follow and that language could not describe. One moment it rested at Naruto's side. The next, it occupied the space where Danzo's neck had been, passing through flesh and bone and marrow with zero resistance, as though the body was incidental, as though the sword cut through the Danzo rather than merely his physical form. The head separated. It tumbled into the blackness below, but the swing did not stop. The Necrosword continued its arc, upward, outward, through the stone ceiling of the cavern, through bedrock, through the mountain beneath the Hokage monument, through earth and rock and root and sky. A single line of devastation that rose from the underground chamber and exited through the top of the mountain above. A diagonal wound in the world that split 50 meters of solid stone as easily as the blade had split the old man's spine. Dawn light poured through the gash. For one instant, the cavern was illuminated by the sunrise above, and the surviving Ambu, those still alive, those still human, could see everything. They could see the pool of black that covered the entire floor, pulsing like a heartbeat. They could see their dead comrades, half consumed, sinking into the liquid shadow. They could see the boy floating at the center of it all, wreathed in living armor that shifted and breathed and watched them with 100 tiny eyes embedded in its surface. They could see the sword in his hand, a wound in space, a tear in the visible spectrum, something the eyes refused to fully process. They could see Danzo's headless body dissolving into the black at Naruto's feet. Every stolen Sharingan consumed, every secret his flesh carried, becoming property of the void. Then the symbiotes came for them, from the pool, from the walls, from the ceiling where the black substance had spread like mold in the moments since the lights died. Small shapes, serpentine, fast, eyeless, launched themselves at the remaining Anbu. They entered through the mouth, through the nostrils, through the eyes, through any opening they could find. And when there was no opening, they made one. One operative screamed for 3 seconds before the sound changed, became a gurgle, became silence, became the absence of a person. His mask cracked and fell away, and behind it his face was blank. His eyes, void black, red spirals. His body straightened. His posture changed. He turned toward Naruto and stood at attention, waiting. Another operative tried to run, made it 4 steps. A tendril caught his ankle, and he fell face first into the pool. He thrashed for 2 seconds. Then he rose again, dripping black, his will erased, his body now a puppet, with every skill and memory intact, but belonging to a new owner. 47 Root Anbu entered that cavern. 47 symbiote soldiers stood at attention when it was over. Every assassination technique they had mastered, every infiltration skill, every coded memory of Root's operations, its bases, its agents across the nations. All of it now belonged to the Hive. All of it now belonged to Naruto Uzumaki. All of it now belonged to the King in Black. He floated upward through the gash his sword had made, through stone and mountain and open air, rising into the dawn above Konoha, visible for one brief moment against the early morning sky, a figure of white and black and red, framed by the wound in the mountain, surrounded by a cape of living shadow that spread behind him like wings made from the end of everything. Below, the village slept. Civilian rooftops, market streets, the academy where children learned to throw kunai, the Hokage tower where the third sat behind his desk and smoked his pipe and told himself that the boy was safe, that the village was kind enough, that time would heal what policy had broken. Naruto looked down at all of it, and then he turned away. He flew toward the horizon, carried by wings of living abyss, accelerating into the distance, leaving Konoha behind like a childhood home that had never been a home at all. Behind him, the mountain continued to bleed shadow from its wound. It would do so for 3 days. People would stare at it. Experts would be summoned. The third Hokage would descend into the cavern and find 47 empty Root uniforms, a puddle of corroded metal, and 0 bodies. And Danzo Shimura would never be found again. The years moved. The Hive grew. Reports trickled into the intelligence networks of every major village, fragments at first, easy to dismiss. A merchant caravan vanished at the border of the land of hot water. An entire outpost of samurai found standing in formation with blank expressions and black eyes, unresponsive to any stimulus, still as statues. A village in the land of rivers went silent overnight. Every man, woman, and child found the next morning in their beds, alive but empty, their pupils void black and their mouths sealed shut by a substance that dissolved any tool used to cut it away. Jiraiya of the Sannin was the first to connect the incidents. He traveled to 7 different sites across 4 nations over 18 months. He found the same residue at every one, a black substance that retreated from sunlight but reformed in shadow, that dissolved organic matter on contact but left stone untouched, that seemed to pulse with a rhythm independent of any living creature nearby. He brought samples back to Konoha. The samples ate through 3 containment seals, consumed 2 laboratory mice instantly, and had to be destroyed with a sustained S-rank fire jutsu that left the research wing unusable for a month. Jiraiya stood before the third Hokage and spoke a name that had been classified within hours of the mountain incident. It's him. It's Naruto. The pipe trembled in Hiruzen's hand. What he's become, or what he's always been and simply woke up to, I don't know. But what I do know is this. Everywhere that substance appears, everything alive within it belongs to something else afterward. Belonged. Past tense. Because whatever they were before, they aren't anymore. The third Hokage aged 10 years in that single conversation. He issued emergency communications to the other 4 Kage. He sent warnings through every intelligence channel available to him. He doubled border patrols, tripled Anbu rotations, and commissioned the largest research effort in Konoha's history into understanding the black substance and finding its weakness. He would find nothing useful. The substance had no weakness. Light slowed it. Fire forced it back momentarily, but nothing destroyed it permanently. Nothing stopped it from reforming, from spreading, from consuming. Because it was not a substance in the way chakra was a substance. It was something older than the energy system this world was built on. It was the original state of reality, and it wanted its territory back. While the villages panicked and prepared, Naruto moved through the spaces between nations. He consumed small settlements, bandit camps, missing nin hideouts. Every person absorbed added their knowledge to the hive. Every jutsu they carried became his property. A Kiri missing nin gave him water dragon mastery. A Kumo deserter gave him black lightning. A forgotten Uzumaki survivor in the land of whirlpools gave him 3 S-rank sealing techniques and knowledge of Fuinjutsu that had been lost for a generation. The hive grew smarter with every meal, more versatile, more dangerous. And then the king in black turned his gaze toward the land of iron. The land of iron existed outside the shinobi system. It was a nation of samurai, warriors who rejected ninjutsu, who built their strength on steel and discipline, and the raw perfection of the human body pushed beyond its limits. Their leader was Mifune, a swordsman whose reputation had outlasted 3 shinobi world wars. He was the only neutral party respected by all 5 major villages. His words settled disputes between Kage. His nation hosted every summit that required unbiased ground. The land of iron was also, in every way that mattered, a monument to human light. It was built on honor, on tradition, on the belief that willpower and training could overcome any force the world produced. Its warriors stood in the snow and meditated until the cold became meaningless. They trained their blades until the steel became an extension of thought itself. To Naruto, it was a cathedral of everything wrong with this world, a temple to the lie that light could endure, that flesh, properly trained, could stand against the primordial. He would enjoy pulling it down. He arrived at dawn. The land of iron spread before him in pristine white, mountains capped with snow, valleys blanketed in ice, fortresses of gray stone rising from the frozen landscape like monuments to permanence. Banner flags snapped in frigid wind, displaying the iron kanji that had represented samurai strength for 500 years. Naruto descended from the sky above the central valley, carried on wings of living abyss, and he landed in the snow without sound. His bare feet touched the white surface, and where they did, the snow turned black. A circle of blackness that spread outward from him at walking pace, transforming the pristine landscape inch by inch. The perimeter alarm sounded within seconds. The samurai of the land of iron were many things, and unprepared was never one of them. Within 4 minutes, Mifune's vanguard arrived. 2,000 warriors in articulated plate armor, katanas drawn, formed in perfect ranks, their breath crystallized in the air. Their discipline held them steady, even as they registered what they were seeing. A figure of white skin and white hair and living black armor, standing in a growing circle of consumed earth, eyes burning with red spirals that reflected against the snow. Mifune arrived on horseback behind his vanguard. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, a man of 60 who moved with the economy of a 20-year-old at his peak. His sword, Kurosawa, rested in his grip with the comfort of a limb. He had drawn it 10,000 times. It had never failed to cut what he pointed it at. He studied the figure in the valley below, took in the spreading black, the wings, the armor, the sword hanging from shadow at the figure's side. "You are the one they call the Void King," Mifune said. His voice carried across the frozen air with the clarity of a man who had addressed armies for 40 years. Naruto tilted his head. The motion was wrong, too slow, too measured, like something wearing a human body and remembering how heads moved. "I have been called many things across many eons. That name is new, but the concept behind it is ancient." Mifune drew Kurosawa fully, The blade caught the winter sun and gleamed. Behind him, 2,000 samurai shifted into battle formation with the precision of a single organism. "Whatever you are," Mifune said, "the land of iron will be your grave." The barest shadow of a smile crossed Naruto's face. Fangs, white and sharp and too many. "You are nothing but a fleeting spark in my eternal dark." Mifune raised his blade and the army charged. 2,000 samurai broke into motion simultaneously, boots thundering across snow, blades drawn, battle cries rising from 2,000 throats. It was a wall of steel and human will, rushing across the valley like an avalanche that had been given purpose and fury. The sight of it would have broken most opponents. The sound alone, the rumble of that many armored bodies in motion, was designed to shatter resolve before contact was ever made. Naruto raised one hand. The earth beneath the charging army erupted. Living blackness tore upward through the snow, tendrils thick as tree trunks, fast as striking serpents, erupting from beneath the feet of running warriors. The front line vanished. Men who had been sprinting one instant were pulled downward the next, through the snow, through the earth, into the spreading black beneath. Their screams lasted fractions of seconds before the substance filled their throats. The second line tried to leap the erupting ground. Tendrils caught them in the air, wrapped around waists, throats, wrists, pulled them downward. The third line attempted to cut through, their legendary blades striking the tendrils with perfect form and maximum force. The steel corroded on contact. Every blade that touched the living abyss blackened and dripped away, leaving the samurai holding hilts connected to nothing. The charge broke apart in under 10 seconds. What had been a unified, disciplined military force became scattered clusters of men fighting individually against something that came from below, from the sides, from the air. The symbiote tendrils were everywhere, erupting from the snow in patterns that seemed random but accomplished total coverage. Every samurai who fell was consumed. Every armored body pulled beneath the blackened earth emerged seconds later, standing upright, blank-faced, void-eyed, and turned to face their former comrades. Within 2 minutes, half the vanguard had been assimilated. The surviving 1,000 watched their brothers and sisters stand against them. Same armor, same posture, but with black eyes and movements that were slightly wrong, slightly too synchronized, slightly too smooth. Mifune did what legends do. He refused to break. He cut through his own converted soldiers without hesitation. His blade sang. Kurosawa was ancient, folded 1,000 times by a master whose name history had forgotten, and it held together where lesser steel corroded. Mifune moved through the chaos like water through stone, parrying tendrils with strikes too fast to follow, severing them before they could reach his skin, his footwork carrying him across the blackened terrain without slowing. He reached Naruto in 17 seconds. 17 seconds of the most perfect swordsmanship the world had ever produced, a display of skill that transcended technique and entered the realm of art. Every surviving samurai who witnessed it would remember those 17 seconds for the rest of their very short lives. Mifune drove Kurosawa at Naruto's throat, a strike he had practiced until it existed beyond thought, pure instinct, pure speed, pure intent to kill. Naruto caught the blade, between 2 fingers, the edge of Kurosawa, sharp enough to split a falling hair, driven by a man whose strength had shattered boulders in demonstration. Stopped between Naruto's thumb and forefinger, as though it had struck a wall of absolute force. The steel screamed. A high, thin sound, metal under stress it was never built to endure. Black corrosion raced from the point of contact downward along the blade. Kurosawa, the legendary sword that had survived 500 years, that had cut through chakra armor and deflected A-rank jutsu, softened, warped, dripped in thick black tears that fell to the snow and joined the abyss below. Mifune held an empty hilt. He stared at the space where his life's work had been. "You built your entire existence on the principle that what could overcome all obstacles," Naruto said. His voice came from everywhere, from the ground, from the air, from inside Mifune's own armor where the black had begun to seep through joints. "You believed that enough discipline, enough training, enough light concentrated in a single blade could cut through anything." The Necrosword emerged from Naruto's shadow, smooth, inevitable, a blade so black it made the surrounding abyss look gray by comparison. "You were wrong." Mifune stood his ground. His empty hands came up in a guard position, unarmed but refusing to kneel. His eyes held no fear, only acceptance and defiance in equal measure. This was how the greatest swordsman in the world faced his death, standing, ready, unbroken in spirit, even as his body had already lost. The necrosword entered through Mifune's sternum and exited through his spine. The old samurai's eyes went wide. Then they went empty. The light left them. Literal light, the shine of life, the brightness of a will that had burned for 60 years. And when the necrosword withdrew, it pulled something with it. Something invisible to the naked eye, but felt by everything in a kilometer radius. The accumulated mastery of a lifetime. Every stance Mifune had perfected, every kata he had drilled into his bones, every battle decision that had carried him through 3 wars without defeat. The blade drank it all, consumed it, cataloged it, added it to the infinite library of the hive. Mifune's body collapsed. Behind him, across the entire valley, the remaining samurai fell simultaneously, every one of them claimed by the spreading black, their conversions completing in the same instant, their eyes opening void black and red spiraled. The land of iron went silent. From the sky above, Naruto surveyed what he had claimed. Snow that had been white now lay beneath a permanent film of living shadow. The terrain itself converted, the very ground belonging to the hive. The fortresses remained standing, their stone walls untouched, but every flag that had displayed the iron kanji now flew blank and black. The fortress gates stood open, and from them marched columns of assimilated samurai, thousands upon thousands, from every settlement, every barracks, every outpost across the nation. They marched in perfect synchronization towards central staging points, their movements unified by a single will. The first permanent territory of the King in Black had been established. Naruto stood atop the highest tower of Mifune's personal fortress, a structure that had been built to overlook the entire nation. From here, on a clear day, one could see from the northern mountains to the southern border. Today was a clear day, and from border to border the landscape was black, a wound in the map of the world. A nation erased and replaced. He raised his hand, and from his palm, a symbiote dragon uncoiled, massive, multi-headed, born from the converted chakra of Kurama, and grown fat on the stolen strength of 10,000 samurai. It rose above the tower, spreading wings that blotted out the sky above the fortress, and it roared, a sound that shook the mountain peaks and sent avalanches tumbling down distant slopes. That roar carried for 100 miles. Every nation that bordered the land of iron heard it, and every nation that heard it began to be afraid. News traveled by hawk and messenger and terrified survivor. The land of iron gone, an entire nation consumed in a single day. His army assimilated, standing in black ranks along the borders of the converted territory, dead-eyed and waiting. The 5 Kaj convened an emergency session in the land of Earth, the furthest point from the spreading territory. The Tsuchikage, Onoki, hosted. The Raikage, A, demanded immediate military action. The Mizukage, Mei Terumi, counseled gathering intelligence first. The Kazakage sat in grim silence. And the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi III, the man who had let Naruto slip through his fingers, sat with the weight of guilt and terror pressing his old shoulders toward the earth. They debated for 6 hours. They agreed on one thing: containment. The Void King had to be contained. He had walked into the land of iron unchallenged because the samurai had refused outside assistance. That mistake would cost the world dearly. Their plan crystallized around Hozuki Castle, the Blood Prison, the most formidable containment facility ever constructed in the shinobi world. Purpose-built to hold entities that even Kage could not defeat in direct combat. Its seals had been designed by masters from every village over a span of decades. Its warden, Mui, commanded the Heavenly Prison Fire Seal, a technique capable of incinerating anything trapped within its boundaries, burning with a heat sourced from celestial chakra itself. If they could lure the Void King inside and activate every layer simultaneously, the suppression seals, the chakra drains, the barriers, and the Heavenly Prison Fire, they believed they could end this. They had to believe it. Because if the blood prison failed, there was nothing left between the King in Black and the rest of the world. The lure was simple. Naruto consumed power. He absorbed ability. He grew stronger with every warrior he claimed. So they made sure he learned that the blood prison held 500 S-rank prisoners, the most dangerous criminals from every nation, each one carrying unique and devastating abilities. A feast presented openly. A trap disguised as a buffet. It took them 3 weeks to prepare. They reinforced every seal. They tripled the barrier squad. They placed a regiment of elite jonin at every exit. They sealed the facility with 14 overlapping containment barriers, each one powered by a separate chakra source to prevent cascading failure. They brought in seal masters from Uzushigakure's scattered remnants. They did everything that 5 nations working together could do. Naruto arrived on the 19th day. He walked up to the front gates of Hozuki Castle in broad daylight. The guards saw him coming from a mile away, a figure of white and black moving across the dusty terrain at a walking pace, unhurried, his living armor shifting around him in slow ripples. They sounded every alarm available, every defense activated, every seal ignited, every barrier slammed into place. He walked through the gates as though they were open. The outer barriers made contact with his armor and corroded on contact, peeling away like paint and acid, the sealing formulas warping and blackening and failing as the living abyss consumed their chakra source. The second barrier lasted 3 seconds longer. The third held for nearly a full minute before its anchors dissolved. Naruto walked forward the entire time, never stopping, never speeding up, passing through barrier after barrier with the patience of something that understood, on a fundamental level, that obstacles built by creatures of light would always fail against what he was. By the time he reached the central chamber, 11 of 14 barriers had fallen. The remaining 3 converged around him, compressing, tightening, forming a shell of concentrated sealing energy that should have immobilized a Biju. Naruto sat down, cross-legged, in the center of the chamber, wrapped in chains and seals and barriers. He sat with his hands resting on his knees, his void black eyes half closed, his expression carrying something that might have been amusement on a human face, but on his was simply the patience of eternity. Around him, the remaining Anbu squad held position. The warden, Mui, stood at the seal command point with his hands already forming the activation sequence for the heavenly prison. Sweat ran down his face. His hands trembled. He had contained monsters before, but the thing sitting in his prison felt different from every prisoner he had ever held. It felt like trying to cage an ocean, like the walls were the ones trapped, bound to the futility of containing something that had existed before walls were invented. "He's contained," one of the Anbu reported, though his voice wavered. "Activate the heavenly prison," Mui said. "Full power, everything we have." He pressed his palms together and the seals on the floor ignited. Celestial fire erupted from every inscription, a pillar of white-hot flame that filled the chamber from floor to ceiling, burning at temperatures that would vaporize steel, that would turn bone to ash, that would destroy anything made of chakra at the molecular level. The heat was so intense that the observation team 3 rooms away felt their skin tighten and their eyes water. The fire burned for 30 seconds. 40. A full minute. Then laughter. It came from inside the pillar of flame, hollow and vast and ancient, a sound that should have been impossible inside a furnace hot enough to liquefy stone. It echoed off the walls, off the barriers, off the bones of every person in the facility. It was the loneliest sound in the world, the laugh of something that had seen this exact performance 1,000,000 times before and remained unamused. The fire dimmed, the pillar shrank, and the observation team watched in mounting horror as the flames were drawn inward, consumed by the black mass that had expanded from Naruto's body, swallowing the celestial fire the way a hungry thing swallows food. The symbiote mass grew larger with every second of consumption, fed by the heat, by the chakra, by the desperate energy being poured into it. "More! Give it more!" Mui screamed, pushing additional chakra into the seal, draining his own life force to fuel the fire. "You try to burn the void?" Naruto's voice came from everywhere, from inside the fire, from outside the barriers, from inside Mui's own chest. The barriers cracked. Hairline fractures appeared in the seal work, spreading outward like veins in a dying eye. The symbiote mass pressed against them from inside, and where it pressed, the seals aged 100 years in seconds. Ancient, brittle, failing, the first barrier fell, then the second, then the third. They all fell at once. The symbiote mass exploded outward from Naruto's seated body, a detonation of living shadow that filled the chamber in an instant and then poured through every corridor, every cell, every crack in the stone. From Naruto's back, a symbiote dragon erupted, massive, multi-headed, screaming with a voice that cracked the ceiling and brought entire sections of the prison crashing downward. It tore through the barrier squad like they were paper, 36 seal masters consumed in a single sweeping motion of a jaw lined with teeth of compressed void. The elite jonin at the exits fought. For moments, brief, brave, pointless moments. Tendrils found them. Symbiotes filled them. Their eyes went blank. Their bodies turned to face their new king. And in the cells below, 500 S-rank prisoners heard the chaos. Heard the walls cracking. Heard their cell doors disintegrating, eaten away by the black substance that poured through the hallways like a flooding river. Some of them pressed themselves against the far walls of their cells. Some of them tried to fight. Some of them ran. It made no difference. The symbiotes moved through the prison in a wave. Cell by cell, row by row, the prisoners were claimed. A man who had mastered 17 forbidden wind jutsu felt the black enter his mouth and screamed until the scream changed into silence. A woman who had perfected a unique bloodline limit that allowed her to phase through matter thrashed as the substance entered through her pores, through the gaps in her atomic structure that her own technique created. A former Kaji candidate who carried 3 separate Kekkei Genkai felt each one cataloged and consumed as the symbiote locked into his nervous system. 500 prisoners, 500 unique skill sets, 500 lifetimes of training and mastery and desperation, all of it became Naruto's property in under 4 minutes. Mui stood alone in the command room. His heavenly prison seal was dead, the fire extinguished, the chakra gone, his own life force nearly depleted. He raised his hands in one final, desperate attempt, a seal he had never used, never been authorized to use, a dead man's switch designed to collapse the entire prison into itself if containment ever truly failed. A white hand closed over both of Mui's raised fists. "You put 500 weapons in a box," Naruto said, standing before the warden now, close enough that Mui could see the individual tendrils writhing beneath the living armor. "And you labeled the box a trap." His hands tightened. Mui's wrists snapped, both of them simultaneously, the sound like dry branches breaking in winter. The warden screamed. Naruto's grip shifted, moved to Mui's torso, one hand on each side of his chest, and pulled. The sound was worse than the sight. The wet, tearing, cracking sound of a human body being separated by force. Mui's scream split into a gurgle that split into silence, that split into 2 halves of a man falling in opposite directions. Naruto stood in the center of the destroyed blood prison, surrounded by his 500 new soldiers, each one standing at attention, blank-eyed, their unique powers cataloged and ready. Behind him, the symbiote dragon that had torn through the facility coiled around the ruined tower like a serpent claiming a branch, its multiple heads surveying the surrounding landscape with red spiral eyes. The trap had failed. The prison had become a base. The containment facility was now the most heavily powered forward operating point in the Hive's territory. Naruto stepped onto the back of the symbiote dragon and rose into the sky. Below him, his new army began to march outward from the ruined gates. 500 S-rank warriors, enhanced by symbiote strength, moving in perfect coordination toward the borders of the nearest nation. The shinobi world had sent their best containment option against the void. The void had eaten it months past. The map changed. Entire sections of the continent went black on intelligence reports. Territories marked with a single word: lost. The land of iron, the land of hot water, the land of rivers, sections of the land of Earth's southern border. The eastern shore of the land of water, where Kiri had watched in horror as the black tide crept across the ocean's surface itself, moving against current and wind. The Hive's army now numbered in the tens of thousands. Former samurai, former prisoners, former jonin and chunin and genin and civilians, all converted, all enhanced, all moving in coordination guided by a single will. They spread like an oil stain across the map, and wherever they went, the territory behind them transformed. Forests blackened, rivers thickened with the substance. The sky above converted territory carried a permanent overcast of shadow that blocked the sun. The world was shrinking, and above the shrinking world, the moon continued its orbit, white and distant and indifferent to the dying of the light below, until it wasn't indifferent anymore. Toneri Otsutsuki descended from the lunar palace that his clan had maintained for 1,000 years. He had watched the spreading void from above with growing concern, then with fury. This world belonged to the Otsutsuki. Its chakra, its life force, its very existence was a garden planted by his ancestors, and something was consuming the garden before the harvest. He entered the atmosphere wreathed in golden light, a being of pure celestial energy, carrying the Tensagon at full power, his body cloaked in chakra so dense it created a visible aura that stretched for miles behind him. He was, by any reasonable measurement, a god. His power dwarfed any single shinobi alive. His techniques operated on a scale that the shinobi world could barely comprehend. He descended toward the converted territory and spoke in a voice amplified by chakra to reach across continents. Creature of shadow, I am Toneri Otsutsuki. I am the inheritor of the divine will. I am the shepherd of this world. You will return what you have consumed, or I will unmake you. Silence. Then, from the blackened landscape below, a voice rose. It carried weight, and it carried patience, and it carried the unshakable certainty of something that had heard divine proclamations before and found them cute. I am the void. Toneri raised his hands. Between them, energy gathered, a sphere of concentrated chakra so dense it bent the light around it, growing larger and larger until it exceeded the size of a building, then a city block, then a district. The Golden Wheel Reincarnation explosion, an attack designed to crack the world open. A technique built by Otsutsuki hands for Otsutsuki purposes. The resetting of a planet, he fired it downward. The beam was the width of a city. It fell from the stratosphere to the Earth's surface in a column of blinding gold that illuminated the entire continent. Every nation, every border, every shadow. For one instant, the spreading black below was visible in its entirety, and the scope of what had been consumed became undeniable. Half the continent lay beneath living shadow. The beam struck the surface and detonated. The explosion consumed a radius of 50 kilometers. The Earth within that radius was vaporized, reduced to its component atoms and scattered. Mountains ceased to exist. Forests became memories. The terrain itself was reshaped by force that exceeded anything a human had ever produced. The dust cleared. The blackened landscape remained, undamaged, unaffected. The golden explosion had struck the symbiote mass and been absorbed, consumed the way the heavenly prison fire had been consumed, the way Kurama's Biju bomb had been consumed, the way every expression of chakra that had ever been directed at the void had been consumed, because chakra was light given form, and light fed the void. It always had. From the center of the impact zone, a figure rose. Wings of living abyss spread wide, enormous, spanning hundreds of meters, each feather a tendril of black so absolute it appeared as a whole in reality. Naruto ascended at speed, straight upward, through the atmosphere, through the layers of air that thinned and failed, through the barrier between sky and space. He rose to meet Toneri at the edge of the world. The Otsutsuki's Tensagen blazed. He formed a truth-seeking orb of maximum density and hurled it, a sphere of fundamental destruction that unmade anything it touched at the conceptual level. Naruto flew through it. The sphere struck his armor and was absorbed, unmade itself, consumed by something more fundamental than fundamental, something that existed before concepts did. Toneri's face changed. For the first time in a life defined by superiority, genuine confusion registered in his expression. He had thrown a technique that destroyed at the level of reality itself, and it had been eaten. Naruto closed the distance. Kilometers became meters, became nothing. His hand shot forward and closed around Toneri's throat, white fingers against divine flesh, the grip immovable. Toneri fired everything at point-blank range. Truth-seeking orbs, gravitational repulsion, the full force of the Tensagen pouring directly into the hand that held him, enough energy to crack a moon. The armor absorbed it all, grew from it, fed from it. Naruto changed direction, downward now toward the lunar surface visible above them, orientation having shifted in the void of space. He carried Toneri like luggage, accelerating toward the moon's gray face, and drove the Otsutsuki into the regolith at a speed that split the terrain for miles in every direction. Craters formed within craters. The lunar surface cracked like glass beneath the impact. Toneri lay in the crater, gasping, something he should have been unable to do, sustained by his own chakra in the vacuum. His Tenseigin flickered, his golden aura sputtered. The hand on his throat had cracked something fundamental in his confidence, in his power, in his belief. "I am a deity," Toneri gasped. "You are immortal." Naruto looked down at him. Those void black eyes with their red spirals regarded the Otsutsuki the way one might regard a pebble that had briefly been in one's path. The necrosword materialized from the shadows of Naruto's body. It extended outward from his free hand, silent, black beyond black, cutting the thin solar light that reached the lunar surface as though the photons themselves preferred to go around it rather than touch it. "I have slain celestials. You are just a glowing insect." The blade drove downward, through Toneri's chest, through the lunar surface beneath him, through the rock and into the deep core of the moon itself. Toneri's Tenseigin flared once, brilliant and desperate and dying, and then went out forever. What the necrosword pulled from Toneri was enormous. The full accumulated power of the Otsutsuki lineage channeled through a single vessel, gravitational manipulation, truth-seeking destruction, dimensional perception, celestial energy conversion. All of it consumed, all of it added. The hive did not grow stronger in that moment. It grew into a different category of existence. Naruto rose from the crater, leaving the empty shell of Toneri behind. He stood on the lunar surface and spread his arms. The living abyss poured from his body. It spread across the moon in every direction simultaneously. Not crawling but racing, flowing over craters and ridges and plains at the speed of a thought given form. Gray lunar regolith disappeared beneath the black. Ancient dust that had sat undisturbed for millions of years was covered and consumed and replaced. The transformation took less than a minute. From the earth below, observers would have watched the moon go black in real time, its familiar white face vanishing beneath a wave of shadow that swept across its entire visible surface in 60 seconds. And when it was complete, when the entire moon wore a new skin of living void, a sigil ignited on its surface, blood red, enormous. A dragon emblem burned into the face of the satellite, with lines that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Visible from the planet below with the naked eye, the black moon, the red dragon, everywhere on the earth below, in every village, on every border, in every field and home and tower, people looked up, civilians and shinobi alike, Kage and Genin, children and legends, they all saw it. The moon that had watched over them for their entire existence, that had been a constant of their sky since before memory, replaced, claimed, marked with the sigil of something that had decided the sky itself belonged to it. Then the eclipse began. The black moon moved, shifted in its orbit, taking a position between the earth and the sun that should have been impossible, that violated the basic mechanics of celestial movement. It settled there, permanent, unmoving, and the world below fell into shadow, permanent overcast. The sun blocked forever by a moon that now served as a ceiling for the hive. People screamed. Some fainted. Some fell to their knees. Some began to pray to gods who had already failed. In his office in Konoha, the third Hokage dropped his pipe. It clattered on the desk and rolled to the floor. He stared at the window, at the sky beyond, at the impossible black moon with its burning red emblem. "He took the sky," Hiruzen whispered. "He took the sky from us." Omegakure had always been a village defined by rain, perpetual precipitation, a curtain of water falling from ever-present clouds that kept the city in permanent gray. The buildings were steel and iron, built tall and industrial, connected by bridges and pipes and channels that directed the unending flow. Every surface was wet. Every step splashed. Pain controlled this village. Nagato, the Rinnegan wielder, operating through 6 corpse bodies made divine through his will, ruling Omegakure as its self-declared god. His power was absolute within these borders. His rain tiger at-will technique monitored every drop of water that fell, feeling the disruption of anything that entered his territory. He was omniscient here. He was untouchable here, until the rain turned black. It happened at noon, or what passed for noon beneath the permanent eclipse. The drops that fell from the sky shifted color, gray to dark, then darker, then absolute pitch black. Each droplet a tiny sphere of living substance that hit the ground and spread rather than splashing. that coated surfaces rather than running off them. Pain's sensory technique screamed. Every raindrop in his city was suddenly something else, something his chakra could feel but could not read, something that registered as a void in his perception rather than a presence. He moved immediately. All 6 paths of Pain gathered on the highest tower of the village, the God Tower, where he delivered judgment and accepted worship. Konan materialized beside him, her paper body reforming from 1,000 folded sheets. Below them, emerging from the shadows of the industrial streets, 2 more figures moved to intercept what was coming. Itachi Uchiha, Sharingan blazing, and Kisame Hoshigaki, Samahata unwrapped and hungry. The black rain intensified. The streets below began to flood, living shadow pooling between buildings, climbing walls, consuming metal and concrete and anything organic that remained still for too long. The civilians of Omegakure ran. They ran and the black followed them, rising faster than feet could move through it. Then the screaming started, and then the screaming stopped. One by one, building by building, the population of Omegakure was consumed in under 3 minutes. Every man, woman, and child who had lived beneath Pain's rule becoming property of the hive. Their eyes went black, their movements synchronized. They stopped running and turned as one to face the sky. From the sky, he descended. Through the black rain, carried on wings that shed shadow the way an angel might shed light. Naruto descended toward the God Tower. He was unhurried. The city was already his. Its people were already his. This was simply the arrival, the formal claiming of the only prizes that mattered. The 4 Akatsuki members stood ready. Pain's Deva Path raised its hands, gravitational force building, ripples forming in the air, the technique that had flattened entire cities gathering in his palms. Almighty push. The shockwave erupted. Gravitational repulsion at maximum force, a wave of invisible power that expanded outward at the speed of thought, designed to destroy everything in its path, to push reality itself away from its epicenter. Buildings crumbled, streets shattered. The entire top half of the God Tower disintegrated under the force. Naruto spread his wings wide and flew forward through the shockwave. The gravitational force parted around him, dividing, splitting, flowing past his body the way a river parts around a stone that has sat in its bed since before the river existed. He did not slow. He did not deflect. He simply moved through it, and the force acknowledged that it had met something it could not push, something older than gravity, something that had existed in the void before forces were given names. Kisame moved first of the remaining 3. The Shark Man lunged, Samahata swinging in a massive arc, the living blade's mouth opened wide to consume chakra. It was a weapon designed to eat energy, to devour the power of its enemies and leave them hollow. Samahata made contact with Naruto's armor. The blade screamed, an actual scream, the living weapon recoiling, its wrappings falling away as its mouth slammed shut and it tried to withdraw. The surface of the blade corroded where it had touched the armor, the living steel blackening, the chakra-eating cells dying on contact, the weapon's own life force draining into the void faster than it could consume. Kisame held a dead sword. Naruto's hand shot forward, and the necrosword materialized in it mid-swing. The arc covered the space between Naruto and Kisame in a fraction of a moment, and it did not stop at Kisame. The blade passed through the Shark Man's body and continued outward, and from the cutting edge, a wave of pure anti-energy erupted. Annihilation given form. A shockwave that was the opposite of existence, spreading from the blade in a crescent moon of absolute void. The wave struck the eastern half of Omegakure. Every structure in its path ceased. Buildings, bridges, pipes, converted citizens, all of it erased. Not destroyed, not burned, erased. Where matter had been, empty space remained. A clean section cut from the city as though someone had deleted it from reality's code. Kisame was gone. Nothing remained of him to absorb. The anti-energy had consumed even the shadow of his existence. Itachi's Sharingan spun. Mangekyo activated. Tsukuyomi launched at point-blank range. The most powerful genjutsu in the shinobi world. 72 hours of tortured perception compressed into a single second. A mental prison from which there was no escape. Designed to break minds beyond repair, Naruto's eyes met Itachi's. The Tsukuyomi collapsed. Inside the genjutsu, in the fractional instant before it failed, Itachi saw what lived behind those void black eyes. A flash of comprehension. An abyss so vast and so old that the Mangekyo Sharingan, a tool designed to perceive and manipulate reality, simply shut down rather than process what it was seeing. The technique crumbled. The mental prison that Itachi had constructed dissolved in the face of a mind that contained eternities. Itachi's Mangekyo bled. Both eyes hemorrhaged simultaneously, the strain of attempting to process the King in Black's consciousness overloading the system that the Sharingan operated on. He staggered. For the first time in his career as a prodigy, as a genius, as the strongest genjutsu user of his generation, Itachi Uchiha was the one left reeling from a mental confrontation. Naruto's hand closed around Itachi's face before the Uchiha could recover. "Your eyes see truth," Naruto said, his voice arriving from every direction, from the black rain still falling around them. "So let them see the truth of what stands before them. Every god your world ever feared was a child compared to what I was before your world existed." Symbiote mass poured from Naruto's palm into Itachi's eyes, his ears, his mouth. The Uchiha thrashed. His Susanoo flickered to life, skeletal, desperate, and the armored guardian managed to form for 1/2 second before the living abyss consumed it from within. The ethereal ribs blackened, the spectral armor corroded. The Mangekyo Sharingan, the pinnacle of Uchiha evolution, was overridden from the inside. Itachi went still. His body straightened, his hemorrhaging eyes healed, and when they opened again, the Mangekyo still spun, still held all its power, but the pupils behind it were void black with red spirals. Itachi Uchiha's full repertoire, Tsukuyomi, Amaterasu, Susanoo, every technique a genius had mastered in 21 years of life, now belonged to the hive. Konan moved. Paper exploded from her body, a storm of 10 billion sheets, each one infused with explosive tags wrapping around Naruto in a sphere designed to detonate with enough force to reshape terrain. She had prepared this technique for years. She had built it to kill gods. Naruto stood inside the paper sphere and the symbiote mass simply expanded. Living shadow poured outward, consuming paper as fast as it wrapped, dissolving the sheets, eating the explosive seals, neutralizing the detonation before it could complete. 10 billion sheets became 10 billion flakes of black that fell to the ground and joined the spreading tide. Konan rematerialized above, her eyes wide. She had put 6 years of preparation into that technique. 6 years of folding and sealing and accumulating enough paper bombs to crack a continent. A single tendril of black caught her ankle. She was pulled downward, into the pool of consumed paper, into the hive. Her expression changed from shock to blank in 1.3 seconds. Her paper manipulation technique, every fold, every configuration, every creative application she had ever invented, became Naruto's. Pain remained. The Deva path stood alone on the wreckage of the God Tower. The other 5 paths had been consumed minutes ago, their bodies overrun by the black rain that now coated every surface of the ruined village. Naruto, in his distant hiding place, poured everything into this single remaining vessel. Maximum power, maximum focus. "You believe yourself a god," Pain said. The Rinnegan eyes, purple and ringed and carrying the weight of the most powerful dojutsu in shinobi history, fixed on Naruto with the intensity of a man betting everything on a final hand. Naruto descended to stand on the wreckage across from the Deva path. Rain fell between them, black rain, thick and alive, beating on Naruto's armor and absorbing into it. "I am the King in Black." Pain raised both hands. Chibaku Tensei. The gravitational core launched upward, a black sphere of condensed force that began pulling everything toward it. The earth below ripped apart. Buildings lifted, metal twisted and flew upward. Rock and soil and debris accumulated around the core, growing rapidly, forming a planetoid above the destroyed village. The technique that had imprisoned the Nine Tails, the technique that simulated the creation of celestial bodies, the single most powerful gravitational technique in existence, Naruto watched it form. He let it grow. He let the planetoid swell to its maximum size, a mass the size of a small mountain floating above what had been Amegakure. And he watched Pain's expression shift from concentration to triumph. Then he raised the Necrosword and swung upward. The blade met the planetoid. And the planetoid came apart, split along the line of the cut. The gravitational core severed. The binding force dissipated in an instant. 2 halves of a mountain fell in opposite directions, crashing into the landscape miles away with impacts that registered as earthquakes across 3 nations. In the rain-soaked rubble between them, Pain's expression did not change. It could not change. It was a corpse animated by will. But in his hidden location, Nagato felt something he had promised himself he would never feel again. Powerlessness. Naruto crossed the distance in a single step. His hand closed around the Devapath's face, around the pierced flesh of what had once been Yahiko's body, and he pulled. He pulled the Rinnegan from the skull. Both eyes, extracted by raw force, torn from their sockets with a sound that was wet and final. Naruto held them in his palm, two purple eyes, still blazing with power, the most coveted dojutsu in human history. He crushed them, ground them to paste between his fingers, discarded the fragments. Chakra is a sickness, he said, watching the purple fluid drip from his fist. I am the end of the fever. Miles away in his mechanical life support chamber, Nagato screamed. The connection to his final path severed. His own Rinnegan eyes, still in his physical skull, flickered, and through the walls of his hidden bunker, living black seeped through the cracks. Through the metal, through the machinery, Nagato died slowly. The symbiote entered his body inch by inch, and the man who had declared himself a god felt every moment of the consumption. His Rinnegan, the original eyes, the source, were claimed last, and when they were claimed, they changed. Purple became void black with red spirals, the Rinnegan of the Sage of Six Paths lineage, the divine eyes of the Otsutsuki bloodline. Added to the hive, added to the collection, Omega-kure fell silent. The eternal reign continued, but it was black now, and would be forever. The industrial city that had been Pain's throne became another territory of the king in black. Its converted population stood in the streets between the remaining buildings, void-eyed, waiting. Naruto rose above the ruined village and looked outward, toward Fire Country, toward Konoha, toward the place where this body had been born and abandoned and tortured and discarded. It was time to go home. The final alliance formed in desperation. When word reached the remaining villages that the Akatsuki, the most feared organization in the shinobi world, had been destroyed in a single encounter, something broke in the collective will of the shinobi nations. The Akatsuki had been the boogeyman, the thing that kept Kage awake at night, and the king in black had walked through them the way someone walks through a doorway. The Raikage smashed his desk in half when the intelligence report arrived. The Mizukage Maid Terumi assembled her entire war council and gave them a single directive: total mobilization. The Tsuchikage Onoki, the man who had survived 3 world wars, looked at the report and said one word: everything. Everything meant exactly what it sounded like. Every shinobi, every samurai remnant, every mercenary, every retired veteran, every academy student old enough to hold a weapon, every forbidden technique hidden in every vault, every summoning contract, every village reserve. 80,000 warriors gathered at the borders of the Land of Fire within 3 weeks. It was the largest military assembly in the history of the shinobi world, larger than any force mobilized during the previous 3 great wars. Representatives from every major village stood in the same formation for the first time in history. 5 Kag, 37 S-rank combatants, thousands of Jonin, thousands more Chunin, and a support corps that stretched for miles behind the front line. And alongside the living forces, 2 figures emerged from Edo Tensei's smoke, summoned by Orochimaru himself, who had offered his services to the Alliance in exchange for survival. The Snake Sanin stood behind his creations with an expression of practiced detachment that failed to hide genuine fear. Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, the Yellow Flash, the fastest shinobi who ever lived, the man who had sealed the 9 Tails into his own son, brought back from death to face what that son had become. Hashirama Senju, the 1st Hokage, the god of shinobi, the man who had tamed Biju with his will alone, who had shaped the very landscape of the shinobi world, who had defeated Madara Uchiha at the Valley of the End. The single most powerful shinobi in recorded history. They stood together before the assembled army, 2 legends of incomprehensible power, restored to their prime by the Edo Tensei's perfection of form. The army at their backs looked at these 2 figures and felt something stir. Something like hope. The god of shinobi and the Flash, together, leading them, standing against the void. Minato looked at the black horizon. He could feel it. The signature that should have been his son, twisted beyond recognition into something that made his sensing ability recoil. "Kushina," he whispered. "Forgive me." Hashirama stood beside him, his expression carrying a weight that even his legendary optimism could not lift. He could feel the earth itself groaning beneath the approaching presence. The trees whispered of something wrong in the world, something that ate wood, that consumed nature, that denied the very concept of growth. "This will be unlike anything we have ever faced," Hashirama said. The Raikage cracked his knuckles. Lightning cloaked his body. "Then we face it anyway." Above them, the black moon stared down. The red dragon emblem burned in the permanent eclipse, watching, waiting, belonging to the enemy they were about to confront. He arrived at dusk, or what dusk had become beneath the eternal eclipse, a slight shift in the quality of shadow, a barely perceptible darkening that indicated the sun had moved behind the moon's black face. The sky above the assembled army went wrong. It filled. Shapes moving in the overcast, enormous shapes, serpentine and multi-headed, descending through the eclipse shadow in a rain of living black. Symbiote dragons, dozens of them, then 100, then more than counting aloud, dropping from the sky in a cascade of wings and teeth and burning red eyes. The army's front line broke before a single blow was struck. The sight of those things, each one the size of a bijou, each one moving with coordinated intelligence, each one screaming with a voice that made bones vibrate, shattered the formation of the outer ranks. Shinobi scattered. The screaming started. Dragons landed among the troops. Their mouths opened and from them poured symbiote mass, flooding the ground, coating the running soldiers, consuming them where they stood or where they fell. A single dragon consumed a regiment of 400 chunin in under 10 seconds, opening its multi-jawed heads and unleashing a wave of black that washed over them like a tide over an anthill. The Raikage charged the nearest dragon. Lightning armor at maximum output, his fist carrying enough voltage to power a city, striking the creature's skull with everything Akage could produce. His fist sank into the dragon's head and stuck. The living armor of the creature consumed his lightning, ate his chakra cloak, and pulled his arm deeper. A pull the other direction with all his monstrous strength. The dragon turned one of its many heads toward him and opened a secondary jaw inches from his face. Mei Terumi's lava release burned through that jaw, a stream of molten rock that forced the drag backward long enough for A to wrench free. His lightning armor was gone. His right arm was blackened to the shoulder, the skin consumed and replaced by spreading symbiote mass that he fought with raw chakra, burning it off inch by inch. "There's too many!" Mei shouted across the chaos. "We need to hit the source!" The source descended. From the very center of the sky, carried on wings so vast their shadow covered the battlefield itself, Naruto fell toward the earth. Slow, unhurried, arms at his sides. The necrosword resting in his right hand with the ease of something that belonged there, that had always belonged there. He touched down in the center of the chaos, and the battle shifted. Every soldier within 100 meters of his landing point was claimed instantly. The ground beneath them erupting with symbiote mass that consumed them where they stood. A circle of void-eyed soldiers formed around him in seconds, a personal guard of converted warriors who had been fighting against him moments ago. Minato moved. The yellow flash lived up to his name, a blur of speed that crossed the battlefield in microseconds, the signature tri-pronged kunai already thrown, the Hiraishin technique carrying him to Naruto's side faster than perception could track, Rasengan in hand. The spiraling sphere of pure chakra rotation. His masterwork, his legacy, the technique he had spent 3 years developing, driven toward Naruto's skull with the speed and precision that had earned him his title. The Rasengan made contact with Naruto's armor. It spun against the surface for a fraction of a second, the chakra sphere grinding against living shadow, and then it was consumed, absorbed. The rotation died. The energy was eaten, and Minato stood with his palm pressed against the shoulder of what had been his son. His technique gone, his body within arm's reach of something that had killed hundreds in the time it took to blink. "You are fast," Naruto said. He turned his head to look at the Edo Tensei recreation of his father. Those void black eyes found the blue eyes that matched the face this body had been born with. Speed is nothing when there is nowhere to run to. A tendril erupted from Naruto's shoulder, from the exact point where Minato's hand still rested. and pierced through the Edo Tensei body before the Flash could react. Even his speed, the speed of a man who had once outpaced the Raikage, was insufficient when the attack came from beneath his own palm. The symbiote mass flooded into Minato's restored body. The Edo Tensei regeneration fought it, cells trying to reform around the infection, the jutsu's automated repair struggling against the consuming shadow. For 3 seconds, Minato's body was a war zone, regenerating and being consumed simultaneously, his form flickering between solid and shadow. The shadow won. Minato's eyes went void black. His body stabilized, fully restored, fully infected. The Hiraishin formula still active, the Rasengan still available, all of his techniques now property of the Hive. The fastest shinobi who ever lived stood at attention beside his son. A weapon, a puppet, a trophy. Across the battlefield, shinobi who had seen the yellow flash fall stopped fighting. Some dropped their weapons, some sat down in the spreading black and waited for the end. The hope that Minato's resurrection had generated died harder and faster than the man himself. But Hashirama still stood. The god of shinobi moved to the front, stepping through the chaos, his wood release erupting from the earth around him. Giant trees burst from the soil, forming barriers, walls, shields, trying to create space to hold back the spreading tide. His power was immense. The largest wood constructs ever seen sprouted in seconds, forests born from will, a wall of nature between the remaining army and the approaching void. Naruto watched the trees grow, and he smiled. It was a terrible expression. Fangs gleamed against bone-white skin. Red spiral eyes pulsed with something that might have been amusement, the kind of amusement that a hurricane might feel watching someone open an umbrella. Your wood release draws from nature itself, Naruto said, from life, from growth, from light given form through vegetation. His voice carried across the battlefield, reaching every ear, living or converted. Watch what happens to growth in the void. He raised his hand. Living shadow erupted from his palm in a wave that struck the wall of trees Hashirama had raised. The wood blackened on contact. Every tree, every root, every leaf, claimed by the spreading black in seconds. The forest wall that should have been an impenetrable barrier became a forest of shadow, trees of living void, branches of consuming black, a wall that now faced the wrong direction. The converted forest attacked the army it had been built to protect. Black branches reached for fleeing shinobi. Shadow roots erupted from the ground and wrapped around ankles. Trees bent toward running soldiers and opened mouths in their trunks that should have been impossible, consuming everything they caught. Hashirama's face showed shock for the first time in either of his lives. His wood release, the power that had defined him, that had tamed Biju, that had built a village, turned against him, used against the very army he had been summoned to protect. He moved to his ultimate technique. Sage art, wood release, true, several thousand hands. The earth erupted. A colossus rose from the ground behind Hashirama, the 1,000-armed Buddha, hundreds of meters tall, its countless wooden arms raised in preparation for destruction, on a scale that matched geography. It was the technique that had defeated Madara Uchiha's perfect Susanoo, the technique that had reshaped the Valley of the End. The single most powerful offensive construction any shinobi had ever produced, it towered above the battlefield. Its shadow covered miles. Its arms reached toward the sky, each one carrying enough force to crater mountains. 80,000 soldiers, those still alive, those still unconverted, looked up at the Colossus and remembered why Hashirama was called the god of shinobi. Naruto looked up at it too. I was there before the light, and I will be there after it fades. He raised the necrosword, one hand, one swing, upward, angled across the entire breadth of the 1,000-armed Buddha. From its lower left to its upper right, a diagonal cut that crossed the full width of the colossal construct. The necrosword moved, and everything in its path ceased to resist. Wood parted, arms fell. The body of the Colossus came apart along the line of the cut, sections sliding free from each other, 1,000-year-old timber splitting as though it were paper in the path of something that had been cutting gods since before timber existed. The top half of the 1,000-armed Buddha slid sideways and fell, crashing to the earth with an impact that registered across the continent. But the swing did not stop at the Colossus. The necrosword's arc carried beyond the falling wood, beyond the battlefield, beyond the immediate geography. The cutting force continued, outward, through miles of terrain, through the Hokage monument in the distance. Stone faces splitting and crumbling, the carved legacy of 4 Hokage destroyed in passing, and still further, through the earth itself, a line appeared across the continent. A fracture, visible from above, running from the battlefield toward both horizons. The ground on either side of the line shifted, settling differently, one side dropping an inch, then a foot, then a meter. The tectonic plate had been cut. The continent itself had received a wound. The earth groaned. A sound felt more than heard. The planet's crust expressing pain at being divided by something that cared nothing for geology or mass, or the forces that held worlds together. Hashirama's colossus lay in ruins. His wood release lay consumed, blackened, and turned. His Edo Tensei body stood paralyzed with a horror that had no precedent in his memory. He had built nations. He had fought Madara. He had witnessed the power of Biju and faced it and won. He had never seen a single swing of a sword divide a continent. What? Hashirama started. Naruto appeared before him. Instant, between one blink and the next, close enough to speak without raising his voice. Your village built its walls on light. Watch how quickly walls burn. Symbiote mass poured from the ground, from the air, from the residue of the destroyed colossus. It converged on Hashirama, attacking from every direction simultaneously. The Edo Tensei regeneration fought. Cells reformed as fast as they were consumed. Hashirama's chakra blazed, the mightiest reserves any shinobi had ever possessed, fighting the infection with raw power. It lasted 12 seconds. 12 seconds of the god of shinobi fighting with everything his legend had earned him. Wood release, sage mode, raw chakra output that exceeded Kaji level by factors of 10. 12 seconds of genuine resistance from the single most powerful human the shinobi system had ever produced. Then the void won, as it always did. Hashirama's eyes went void black. Red spirals turned in them. His body stood at attention, fully restored, fully infected, wood release and sage mode in every technique he had mastered across 2 lifetimes, now belonging to the hive. The god of shinobi, made into a servant, on the battlefield, the remaining unconverted forces watched their last hope join the enemy. 60,000 soldiers had already been claimed, converted by dragons, by the spreading ground tide, by the infected warriors turning on their former comrades. 20,000 remained, pressed into a shrinking circle, fighting on all sides against what had been their allies minutes ago. The 5 Kaji stood together in the center of that circle, battered, exhausted, surrounded. The Raikage's right arm was gone, consumed to the shoulder, amputated by his own hand before the infection could spread. The Mizukage bled from a dozen wounds where converted allies had struck her. The Tsuchikage hovered in the air, his back broken, held aloft only by his will. The Kazakage's sand was useless, infiltrated and consumed, his gourd empty and dead. The 3rd Hokage stood among them, his staff broken, his robes torn, looking every one of his years. Naruto descended before them. The necrosword hung at his side. His living armor was unmarred, carrying no sign that a battle of 80,000 shinobi had even occurred. He regarded the 5 Kaj with those endless void black eyes. Your system built villages on stolen land and called it peace, he said. Your Kage hoarded power and called it protection. Your council sacrificed children and called it necessity. Your will of fire, your great truth, your guiding principle, it was always just light. Just an infection you passed to your young to keep them burning for a cause that served only those already burning brightest. He raised the necrosword, the blade pointed skyward, toward the black moon, toward the dragon sigil blazing above them. I am the void. I was here before your first ancestor drew breath. I will be here when the last echo of your civilization fades. This was never a war. Wars require 2 parties capable of winning. This was an arrival. I have arrived. The age of light is finished. He drove the necrosword into the earth. Not a swing, a plant. He pushed the blade down into the soil beneath his feet, and from the point of contact, the ground transformed, spreading outward in a circle that grew faster than sight could track, the earth itself becoming living void, the terrain shifting from natural soil to symbiote mass, the conversion rippling outward from the necrosword's buried blade in every direction. The remaining 20,000 soldiers were consumed in a single wave. The earth claimed them from below, rising up over feet, legs, waists, chests, and they had nowhere to jump, because the ground beneath them for miles in every direction was part of the same organism. The conversion was total. 20,000 voices went silent simultaneously. The 5 Kage fell last, each one claimed by the rising tide, their chakra burning bright for brief instants before the void swallowed it. 5 leaders of 5 nations consumed together their combined power, everything they represented, everything their villages had built across decades, added to the hive. Naruto stood alone on a field of 80,000 converted warriors. They stood in perfect rows behind him, facing outward, void-eyed, ready. The largest army in shinobi history was now the hive's army. Every technique those 80,000 warriors had carried, every elemental release, every bloodline limit, every forbidden jutsu, every clan technique now belonged to a single will. Above them, the black moon watched. The red dragon emblem burned. The permanent eclipse held the world in shadow. Naruto turned toward Konoha. The village was minutes away, the walls visible, the gates standing, the remaining civilian population still inside, believing that the army at the border would save them. He walked. Behind him, 80,000 converted soldiers walked. Above him, hundreds of symbiote dragons circled in the overcast. Beneath him, the converted earth spread ahead of his steps, preparing the way, reaching the village walls before he did. The gates of Konoha did not fall. They dissolved. The wood and metal consumed from within by the symbiote mass that had reached them through the ground, traveling beneath the earth, through the roots, through the foundations, eating the village from below before anyone inside realized the boundary had been breached. Naruto entered Konoha walking. His army stopped at the gates, unnecessary. The village was already his, had been his since the earth conversion reached its water table. Every building, every road, every tree, built on ground that now belonged to the void. He walked to the center of the village, to the academy, to the place where he had been enrolled and ignored and hated and dismissed. He stood in the courtyard where children had thrown stones at him and adults had pulled their own children away. The third Hokage's converted body stood at the gate of the academy, void-eyed, waiting with the rest. Naruto looked at the old man's empty face. "You told me the will of fire would protect me," he said. His voice was level and ancient and carried zero anger. Anger required the investment of caring. "You told me that if I endured, if I smiled, if I believed in the light, the village would see me as something other than a weapon to fear." He tilted his head. "You were the first liar I ever met. You are now the last Hokage who will ever be." He turned away, walked to the Hokage monument, or what remained of it. His earlier necrosword swing had already split the stone faces. He walked to the cliff edge and looked out over the village, over the buildings now coated in black, over the streets where converted citizens stood in silent rows, over the forests surrounding the village that had become living shadow, the Leaf Village, the village of light, the village of fire, consumed, converted, claimed. Below him, spanning out across the continent, across every border, every territory, every nation, the living void spread. The map of the shinobi world was gone. There were no more borders because there was only one territory now. His from the south, converted samurai marched in formation. From the east, converted Akatsuki members moved among their new ranks, their unique powers powering the army's elite vanguard. From the blood prison, 500 S-rank warriors advanced in perfect coordination. From the west, converted Kage and their entire village populations moved as a single organism. And from the north, from the land of iron, where this crusade had first planted its flag, Kurama rose, the symbiote dragon that had been the Nine Tails. Colossal, multi-headed now, 9 heads to match his 9 tails, each one burning with red spiral eyes. He rose above the horizon and roared, and the sound carried across the world, reaching every corner of what had once been a continent of warring nations and was now a single kingdom of absolute black. Naruto stood on the cliff where Hokage had once been carved. He looked out at what he had made, a world without light, a world without chakra's infection, a world returned to the state it had been before the first god ignited the first spark and called it progress. The living armor around him settled. The necrosword dissolved back into his shadow, resting, satisfied, sleeping until the next thing worthy of being cut presented itself. The black moon above cast its dragon sigil across the landscape, a red glow over endless void. the only color remaining in a world that had been stripped of everything else. From the horizon, in every direction, the symbiote dragons took flight. Hundreds of them, rising from converted territory, spreading outward across oceans and continents, carrying the hive beyond the borders of this single landmass. There were other nations, other continents, other worlds perhaps. The void had always been infinite. Its claim would be the same. Naruto closed his eyes. Inside the seal, inside what had been a seal and was now simply a throne room of living shadow, Kurama's voice echoed with borrowed obedience. "The world is yours, King." "The world was always mine," Naruto answered. "They simply forgot who they borrowed it from." He opened his eyes. Red spirals turned in void black depths. The permanent eclipse held above him. His moon, his sky, his shadow cast across everything that existed below. "I was the first," he said to no one. To everyone, to the void that listened because the void was him. "I will be the last. The light was a mistake, and mistakes." He spread his arms. The living armor rippled. Beneath the cliff, across the village, across the nation, across the continent, the converted world pulsed once in response. A heartbeat, the heartbeat of the largest organism in existence. One mind, one will, one endless, hungry, patient king. Somewhere beyond the continent, beyond the ocean, on the remaining untouched land masses of this world, people looked at the sky. They saw the black moon. They saw the red dragon. They saw the permanent eclipse settling over the horizon, creeping closer day by day. They had heard the stories, fragments carried by the rare survivor who had escaped conversion. Wild-eyed men and women who spoke of living shadow, of an army that assimilated rather than killed, of a pale figure with void black eyes who spoke in a voice that came from everywhere. They fortified. They prayed. They prepared their strongest warriors and their deepest bunkers and their most forbidden techniques. Across the ocean, the symbiote dragons flew. They had crossed the sea in hours, creatures of living void that needed neither rest nor air, that moved through the stratosphere at speeds no bird could match. Dozens of them carrying within their mass thousands of converted soldiers, an invasion force the likes of which this world had never produced. The remaining free world had weeks at most, perhaps days, and the king in black stood on his claimed continent, watching his dragons disappear over the horizon, and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no joy. Those were emotions born of struggle, of achievement, of overcoming. He had overcome nothing, because nothing in this world had ever been a genuine obstacle. He felt only the ancient, endless patience of something returning to its natural state. The void had existed before light. It would exist after. The centuries of illumination, of chakra, of civilization, of life, had been an interruption, a fever, and the fever was breaking. In the ruins of the Hokage Tower, a single piece of paper fluttered in the wind that moved through the converted building. It was a class roster from the academy, a list of students enrolled 6 years ago, when Naruto Uzumaki had been a name that teachers spoke with barely concealed disdain. His name was listed last, underlined in red by an instructor who had flagged him for behavioral issues and poor performance, annotated with a note, "Monitor closely, potential security risk." The paper dissolved. The living void consumed it, ink and fiber and the memory of a boy who had once been considered harmless. A boy they had looked at and seen only a container, only a weapon to fear, only a problem to manage. They had been right to be afraid. They had simply been wrong about the reason. The paper was gone. The boy was gone. The village was gone. The world was going. And in the permanent shadow beneath the eclipsed sky, the king in black ruled from the void he had always been. He stood on the cliff where stone faces had once been carved, and he watched through a billion eyes. The hive mind stretched outward from his body like a web spun across an ocean. Every converted soul a node, every symbiote dragon a relay, every inch of blackened earth a nerve ending in a planetary organism that breathed with a single rhythm. His rhythm. The rhythm of the abyss returned to its throne. Across the water, the dragons flew. He could see what they saw. Through the collective perception of 37 symbiote dragons crossing the Western Ocean at stratospheric speed, Naruto witnessed the approaching coastline of a continent the shinobi world had barely acknowledged existed. Green mountains rising from blue water, cities of white stone built along cliff faces, towers topped with banners displaying symbols that belonged to traditions alien to the shinobi system entirely. These people had their own warriors, their own power, their own understanding of the forces that move through the world. They called it something different, a name and a language that the hive had absorbed from a merchant vessel consumed in the crossing. They wielded it differently. Where shinobi channeled chakra through hand seals and elemental affinities, these people drew power from the earth itself through meditation stances and physical forms. Where the shinobi world built villages, these people had built kingdoms spanning thousands of miles. The first dragon made landfall on the western continent at the break of what would have been dawn. Except dawn required sunlight, and the eclipse held the world in permanent shade. The dragon descended through the overcast and struck the coastal city of Terashan with the weight of something falling from the heavens. Naruto watched through its eyes. The city's defenders mobilized in under a minute. Warriors in layered armor of lacquered wood and metal, their bodies wreathed in the pale blue energy they drew from the earth's ley lines. They moved in formations unlike anything the shinobi world had developed. Circular, spiraling, each person feeding their power into the next, building a resonance that amplified the group beyond the sum of its parts. 100 of them together generated a shield of concentrated ley energy that stretched across the city's harbor district like a dome of solid blue light. The dragon opened its jaws and breathed. Living darkness poured from between teeth of compressed void, a river of symbiote mass that struck the dome and pressed against it. The shield held for 4 seconds. The warriors channeling it screamed in unison as their formation buckled. The energy they fed into the barrier, being consumed at the point of contact, drained through the shield itself and into the darkness that pressed against it. They poured more in. Their resonance amplified. The blue light intensified. The darkness pressed harder. The shield cracked along 3 fault lines that spread from the point of contact to the dome's edge. The warriors' unified scream became fragmented, individual voices breaking from the chorus as their energy reserves hit empty. One by one, like candles blown out in sequence, their contributions to the shield failed. The dome fell. The darkness flooded through. Naruto watched from his cliff on the converted continent as the city of Terashan went dark. He felt each new consciousness join the hive, felt their memories, their training, their understanding of the ley line system absorbed and cataloged. 100 warriors became his in under a minute. Their techniques, the resonance amplification, the ley line drawing, the earth connection that powered their forms, all of it became property of the void. 3 more dragons struck the coast simultaneously. 3 more cities fell in the same breath. Inland, the continent's ruling powers received word through their own communication networks. Energy pulses transmitted along the ley lines that connected every major settlement. The messages arrived garbled, corrupted. Because the ley lines were channels in the earth, and the earth beneath the coastal cities was already turning black. The kingdom of Ashvar mobilized its full military might within 6 hours. 12,000 earth warriors gathered at the base of Mount Sheru, the largest ley line nexus on the continent, a mountain that hummed with accumulated centuries of planetary energy. Their king, Torvash the Unbroken, stood before them with his body glowing blue-white from the density of power he drew from the nexus. He was their greatest, a man who had channeled the mountain's full output in battle and used it to redirect rivers, to level forests, to reshape the terrain of his kingdom according to his will. 7 dragons descended upon Mount Sheru at once. Torvash raised his hands and the mountain responded. The entire peak erupted with blue energy, a geyser of raw ley line force that punched upward into the overcast sky, striking the descending dragons with the accumulated power of a continent's largest nexus. The beam was miles wide. It burned so brightly that it was visible from the ocean's far shore. The first dragon absorbed the beam. Its body expanded, swelling with consumed energy, growing larger, its wings spreading wider, its multiple heads multiplying further. What had been a weapon designed to destroy it became a meal. The dragon screamed in something that might have been satisfaction and dove through the dissipating energy straight at the mountain's summit. Torvash watched the creature he had just fed grow to twice its previous size and felt, For the first time in a reign of 40 years, the weight of genuine helplessness. The dragon's talons struck the mountain's peak, and the living abyss poured downward, through the stone, through the nexus itself, converting the ley line's channel from source to endpoint. The energy that had flowed upward through the mountain for centuries reversed. It flowed outward instead, carrying darkness through every connected ley line, transmitting the void through the very system these people had built their civilization upon. Across the continent, in every city and village and outpost connected to the ley line network, the blue glow that powered their defenses flickered and changed color. Blue became purple, purple became black. The channels that had carried life energy for generations now carried the hive. Torvash's 12,000 warriors felt the change in their bones. The energy they drew from the ley lines shifted mid-breath, the familiar warmth becoming something cold and absolute that moved through their bodies with a will that superseded their own. 3,000 of them were converted in the first pulse alone, their eyes going void black as the corrupted ley line energy rewrote their connection to the earth. The remaining 9,000 tried to sever their connections. They cut themselves off from the ley lines, becoming ordinary humans in the span of a heartbeat. Powerless, standing before 7 symbiote dragons with nothing between them in the void except flesh. It took the dragons 2 minutes to finish. Naruto felt Torvash's mind join the hive, the king's lifetime of ley line mastery, his understanding of the planetary energy system, his ability to redirect continental scale power through his body, became another tool in an arsenal that had long since passed the point of measurement. The western continent fell in 3 days. The southern landmass lasted 4. Its people were seafarers, built their civilization on the water, lived in floating cities that moved with the currents, drawing power from the ocean's tides through techniques that converted motion into usable energy. They believed the sea would protect them. They believed that water moved too fast, changed too often, for the darkness to claim it. The symbiote mass converted the ocean's surface beneath their cities in a single night, spreading across the water in a film of living black that extended from horizon to horizon, turning the sea into an extension of the hive. The floating cities sat on a surface that belonged to the void, and the darkness rose through their holes, through their pipes, through the water they drank and the rain that fell upon them. Naruto watched it all. He stood on his cliff and felt the planet's population flowing into the hive in millions. Each mind, each memory, each unique ability or skill or piece of knowledge becoming his property at a rate that would have overwhelmed any consciousness built on light. His was built on the void. The void had contained everything before light existed. It could contain everything again. The Eastern Archipelago mounted the most organized resistance of the remaining free world. Its people had received warnings, fragmented communications from the Western continent's last free transmitters, desperate messages describing the black tide and the dragons and the void-eyed armies. They had time to prepare. 3 weeks of time, during which their greatest minds worked together to develop countermeasures based on the scattered intelligence they received. They built weapons powered by pure light, concentrating sunlight through crystal matrices into beams of focused radiance that they believed, based on the reports that light slowed the darkness, would burn through the symbiote mass. They covered their cities in mirrors and polished metal, creating environments of maximum illumination where shadows had nowhere to gather. They built their final defense around the principle that had been whispered across every intelligence channel. Light was the darkness's weakness. It was a misunderstanding. Light did not weaken the void. It annoyed the void. The way a match annoys an ocean, producing heat, producing visibility, producing a brief local effect that the surrounding mass acknowledges and ignores with equal measure. When the dragons arrived above the Eastern Archipelago and found cities built of mirrors and crystal, cities blazing with concentrated sunlight redirected through 1,000 lenses, cities that burned so brightly the air above them shimmered, Naruto felt something move through the hive mind that might have been amusement. The dragons descended into the light. The concentrated beam struck their bodies and the symbiote armor absorbed it, converted it, fed from it, The dragons grew in the light the way a fire grows in oxygen. The very countermeasure the archipelago had devoted 3 weeks to building, becoming fuel for the invasion force. The mirror cities went dark one by one. Their crystal matrices were consumed. Their light weapons turned inward, redirected by converted operators who now served the hive, the concentrated beams carving through their own defenses with the same efficiency they had been designed to destroy the enemy with. By the 7th day, there was nowhere left on the planet's surface that did not belong to the void. Every landmass, every ocean, every mountain and valley and forest and desert and city and village and isolated hermit's cave in every corner of the world, all of it black, all of it his. The planet's population in its entirety, billions of minds, billions of bodies, billions of unique lives, each carrying their own collection of skills and memories, absorbed into the hive. Naruto stepped off the cliff. He did not fall. He rose, carried upward by wings of living abyss, ascending through the atmosphere of a converted world, rising above the blackened landscape until the planet's curvature became visible below him. From this height, the conversion was absolute and obvious. A world wrapped in living shadow, its former blues and greens and browns replaced entirely by the matte black of the void. The ocean shimmered with the substance. The land masses pulsed with the hive's heartbeat. The black moon hung above, his moon, bearing his sigil. The eclipse still holding as it had since he claimed it. He looked outward, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the moon, into the space between worlds where light traveled in lonely streams and darkness filled everything else. Something was approaching. He could feel it through the hive mind, a disturbance at the edge of the converted territory, at the outermost boundary of what the void had claimed. Something familiar and unwelcome, the scent of resistance, gathering in a place that had thought itself safe. Below him, on the planet's surface, in the ruins of what had been the shinobi continent, a single location remained active in a way the rest of the world did not. A mountain complex, buried deep, shielded by barriers that predated the shinobi system, sealed behind walls that drew on power older than chakra. A fortress that had existed since before the sage walked the earth, built into dimensional folds that the conversion could reach, but had chosen to circle rather than consume, because what lived inside it was worth consuming last. Naruto descended. The wings folded against his back, and he fell toward the continent at a speed that would have burned anything else entering the atmosphere. The air screamed around him, or rather, the air parted, terrified to make contact with the body dropping through it. He struck the earth without slowing, and the ground accepted him the way it accepted everything now, as its master. The mountain complex sat in the volcanic range that had once bordered the land of hot water and the land of earth. Its entrance was hidden, sealed behind 11 layers of space-time manipulation that folded the approach into recursive loops. Anyone walking toward it would find themselves walking away from it. Anyone tunneling toward it would find the earth redirecting their path. Naruto walked forward, and the recursive folds parted like curtains. The space-time manipulation registered his presence and failed. Its looping architecture built on principles of dimension and distance, and the void acknowledged neither. He passed through 11 layers of misdirection in a straight line, each one collapsing as his foot crossed its threshold. The entrance revealed itself. A door cut into volcanic stone, inscribed with formulas that pulsed with a sickly green light, the work of someone who had studied sealing for decades and understood every principle except the one that mattered. Seals were built on light. Behind that door, he could feel them. 4 presences, 3 living bodies, and one thing that occupied a body without quite being alive in any traditional sense. He pushed the door open with one hand. The interior of the complex was vast, carved from the mountain's core over decades of hidden labor, filled with equipment and research materials, and sealed containers holding samples and specimens from a lifetime of obsessive study. Tubes of fluid lined the walls, bodies suspended in preservation, experiments halted mid-process, an archive of forbidden work that spanned the career of the most relentless researcher the shinobi world had produced. Orochimaru of the Sannin stood at the center of the main chamber with his arms folded, and his yellow eyes carrying the same expression they had always carried. Hungry intelligence assessing a specimen. But beneath that expression, for the first time in a life defined by the absolute refusal to acknowledge anything as beyond his comprehension, something flickered. Something that tasted like the understanding that he had perhaps miscounted. Beside him, Kabuto Yakushi stood in full sage transformation. His body was a patchwork of modification, scales coating his arms and torso, a white horn protruding from his forehead, his eyes slitted and golden, his form radiating the natural energy of a white snake sage pushed to its absolute limit. His sensing ability in this form was extraordinary. He had felt Naruto coming from the moment the mountain complex's outer barriers began to dissolve. At the rear of the chamber, half merged with a wall of black biological matter, a figure that had once been Madara Uchiha, observed through three eyes, two eternal Mangekyo and a single Rinnegan, all set in a face that was half human and half Zetsu. The white and black substance of the artificial being merging with preserved Uchiha flesh in an amalgamation that should have been impossible but existed through sheer force of accumulated will. And in the corner, shadow-wrapped, Rinnegan blazing, Susanoo flickering in a half-formed ribcage around his body. Sasuke Uchiha watched the door with the expression of a man who had already written his own ending and was simply waiting for the page to turn. Orochimaru spoke first. He always spoke first. Fascinating, the snake said. His voice carried the silk-smooth tone of a man who had bargained with death so many times that he had begun to consider it a colleague. The entire planet in 60 days, I'll admit, the timetable exceeded my projections. He raised his right arm. The skin rippled, not with the living abyss, but with something else entirely. A network of sealing formulas appeared along his flesh, glowing in alternating colors that shifted through the spectrum faster than the eye could track. The seals layered over each other, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, inscribed at the molecular level, each one a different barrier system, designed to reject foreign organisms at the point of entry. I have spent every moment since the mountain incident preparing for this conversation, Orochimaru continued. His yellow eyes tracked Naruto's form with the analytical hunger that had defined every encounter the snake had ever engineered. Every sample of your substance that reached the edges of the conversion, I collected. I studied. I broke down the structure at the cellular level. I mapped its responses. I found its patterns. His right arm blazed with concentrated seal light. A barrier erupted from the network, surrounding Orochimaru's body in a shell of interlocking formulas that rotated and shifted and reformed in continuous motion. It was brilliant work. The barrier's design incorporated everything Orochimaru had learned from studying the symbiote samples. Its surface was designed to repel the living abyss at every level of interaction, from physical contact to chakra infiltration to dimensional intrusion. My body is now a sealed system, Orochimaru said. Every point of entry is blocked. Every channel is locked. Every surface is treated with a rejection agent derived from the one element your substance consistently avoids, natural sage energy in its purest, most concentrated form. He smiled. The expression showed fangs that had been sharpened over decades of transformation. You cannot infect what you cannot reach. Naruto stood in the doorway. The living armor shifted across his body in slow waves, tendrils reaching outward, testing the air, tasting the barrier Orochimaru had built around himself. The red spiral eyes turned their rotation toward the snake. With the patience of something watching an insect build its nest, he said nothing. He stepped forward. Kabuto moved first, exploding from his position beside Orochimaru with the burst speed of a fully activated Sage mode. His body blurred. The white snake sage power coursing through him granted reaction times that exceeded human limits, and his modified form carried techniques stolen from every body he had ever studied and integrated. He struck from Naruto's left, a chakra scalpel extended to 3 meters in length, edged with concentrated natural energy, driving toward the joint between Naruto's armor plates at the neck. The scalpel made contact. It actually cut into the living armor's surface for a depth of 1 centimeter before the void sealed around the blade. Natural sage energy. Orochimaru had been right about one thing. It disrupted the symbiote mass at the point of contact. The substance could not immediately consume what was saturated with the energy of the natural world in its raw form. Kabuto pressed the advantage. His free hand formed a seal and his body sprouted, 8 additional arms erupting from his torso, each one carrying a chakra scalpel of the same sage-infused design. He attacked in a blur of strikes, 9 blades hitting from 9 angles simultaneously, each one cutting into the armor at the surface level, each one creating a momentary gap in the living shadow. It was genuinely impressive. The most effective offense anyone had mounted against the Void since the very beginning. Naruto let it continue for 6 seconds, watched the scalpels cut, felt the sage energy disrupt the armor's surface layer, registered the technique's effectiveness against the outermost shell of the symbiote mass, the skin, the veneer, the thinnest possible fraction of what he was. Then he moved his hand and caught all 9 of Kabuto's arms simultaneously. The living abyss erupted from his palm, but different from before, adapted. The hive had absorbed a planet's worth of biological data since the last time it had encountered sage energy. It had consumed the ley line system of an entire continent, natural energy by another name. It had incorporated the earth warrior traditions of the western landmass. The Void had learned. The sage energy in Kabuto's scalpels met darkness that had already eaten the concept of natural energy from 6 different civilizations and found it familiar rather than foreign. The disruption effect failed. The scalpels corroded from the point of contact inward, sage energy consumed, natural power overwhelmed, the rejection mechanism overridden by a void that had grown beyond the countermeasure's design parameters since the samples were collected. Kabuto's eyes went wide. His sage sensing, the ability that let him perceive the world in perfect detail, showed him what was happening at the energy level. The darkness was eating his natural energy faster than he could produce it. It was a net negative, a drain. He was feeding it. He tried to pull back. 8 of his 9 arms were already black to the elbow, the symbiote mass climbing his modified flesh with the speed of something that recognized food. His remaining free arm formed a seal, the suicide technique he had prepared as a last resort, a self-destruction that would scatter his chakra across a wide enough area to prevent absorption. Naruto's free hand closed around Kabuto's throat before the seal completed. The conversion was fast. Sage mode fell first. The natural energy reserves consumed in a single gulp, drained through the connection points where the void had already established itself in Kabuto's flesh. Then the modifications went. Every stolen ability, every integrated technique, every piece of another person's body that Kabuto had sewn into his own. The hive cataloged each one as it was absorbed. Sound 4 techniques, Kimimara's bone manipulation, Yugo's sage transformation, Orochimaru's regeneration markers, medical jutsu refined beyond any other practitioner alive. Kabuto's slitted eyes went void black. Red spirals replaced his sage pupils. His body straightened, fully converted, fully owned, every piece of stolen genius now belonging to a new thief. Orochimaru watched his assistant fall with an expression that did not change. His yellow eyes tracked the conversion process with the same analytical hunger they tracked everything. Recording, analyzing, learning even now, even at the end, because that was what Orochimaru was, a creature of learning above all else. Interesting, the snake said. You've adapted beyond the samples. That eliminates my primary countermeasure. His barrier still held. The interlocking seals still rotated around his body. The rejection field still pulsed. Naruto turned his void black eyes toward Orochimaru. He walked forward. Each step brought him closer to the barrier, and with each step, the living armor extended tendrils toward the seal network. The tendrils made contact with the outer layer of Orochimaru's defense, and the barrier flared, pushing back, rejecting, doing exactly what it had been designed to do. Naruto raised the hand that held nothing. He reached into the space beside him, into the void that existed between moments, between atoms, between the concept of here and the concept of there. What emerged was a blade, and the air around it died. The light in the chamber dimmed. The seal light on Orochimaru's barrier flickered as something entered the room that was older than the principles those seals were built on. All black, the Necrosword. It emerged from shadow, the way a predator emerges from water. Smooth, inevitable, carrying the weight of every god it had ever unmade in the black of its edge. The blade was absence given form. It was the space between stars compressed into something that could be held. Its edge existed at a point where the concept of resistance had been removed, cut away by the blade itself, until the universe learned that parting was easier than contact. Naruto raised the Necrosword and pressed its tip against Orochimaru's barrier. The seals met the blade. For one instant, one fraction of a moment that might have been a victory in another story, the barrier held. The rejection field pushed against the Necrosword's edge. The seal network flared at maximum output, every formula Orochimaru had inscribed activating simultaneously, pouring concentrated resistance against the point of contact. The Necrosword did not cut through the barrier. It cut through the idea of the barrier. The blade moved forward and the seals did not break. They ceased to have ever been relevant. The Necrosword's edge operated below the level of energy, below the level of chakra, below the level of intention. Seals required all three to function. The blade existed in the space beneath all three, the primordial dark that was present before anyone thought to put pen to paper and call it protection. Orochimaru's barrier peeled away from the Necrosword's path like skin from a wound. The interlocking formulas he had spent years perfecting separated along the line of the blade, the seal network splitting open, its architecture compromised at the foundational level, every layer coming apart simultaneously, because the bottom layer had been cut and nothing above it had anything to stand on. The snake moved. Orochimaru's survival instincts were legendary, honed across decades of courting death and stepping aside at the last instant. His body shed its skin in an explosive substitution, the 8 branches technique activating, his form erupting into a massive 8-headed serpent that burst from his human shell in a fountain of scales and venom. The Hydra form filled the chamber, 8 enormous snake heads striking from 8 angles, each one carrying a different cursed seal variant in its fangs, each one a separate escape route if the others fell. Orochimaru's ultimate survival form, the shape he took when death came close enough to smell, the final trick of a man who had cheated the Reaper more times than history had recorded. Naruto swung the Necrosword once, a horizontal arc that covered the full width of the chamber. 3 heads fell. Severed at the neck, the cut so clean the scales did not have time to register separation before the stumps were already hitting the floor. The severed heads dissolved, consumed by the Necrosword's residual presence, the living flesh eaten by the anti-energy that bled from the blade's passing. Orochimaru's remaining 5 heads struck simultaneously. Fangs extended, venom dripping, each bite designed to inject a different variant of the curse seal directly into whatever they hit. The technique was built on the assumption that anything biological could be overridden by Orochimaru's genetic markers. A lifetime of body stealing condensed into an injectable form, the fangs hit Naruto's armor, sank in, the venom entered the symbiote mass and was consumed. The curse seal variants, each one a masterwork of forbidden modification that had taken years to develop, were cataloged, absorbed, and added to the hive's arsenal in the time between one heartbeat and the next. The fangs themselves corroded. The scales around the mouths blackened. The living abyss climbed the remaining heads. Orochimaru shed again, a white snake erupting from the mouth of the largest head, his true form fleeing the consumed Hydra, the smallest and most essential version of himself, trying to escape through a tunnel he had pre-carved in the mountain's stone. A final exit, a hole too small for anything except his snake form to fit through. The last contingency of a man who had never once faced a situation without 17 escape routes planned. The tunnel was already black inside. Orochimaru's snake form slithered into the darkness he had expected to be an escape and found instead the void waiting with patience and hunger in equal measure. The darkness closed around him from every direction. Floor, walls, ceiling, all of it living, all of it his enemy. He shed again. Another body erupted from the snake's mouth, smaller, more concentrated, a version of himself reduced to pure consciousness, housed in the minimum viable biological shell again and again. 6 times in 30 seconds, each new form emerging from the last and finding the void already there, already waiting, already closing. The 7th time, there was nothing left to shed. The darkness consumed the final Orochimaru. The smallest version, the irreducible core of a man who had spent his entire existence pursuing the immortality that would let him learn everything. The void took him, and with him, it took every forbidden technique he had ever mastered, every body he had ever stolen, every experiment he had ever completed, every jutsu he had collected across a lifetime of obsessive accumulation. The last expression on Orochimaru's last face, the micro-instant before the void black replaced the yellow of his eyes, was surprise. Pure, unfiltered, genuine surprise. The emotion of a man who had believed in his deepest self that his mind was vast enough to account for everything. That intelligence itself was the ultimate survival tool. He had been wrong in a way that his intelligence was insufficient to process. The void had existed before intelligence, before learning, before the concept of a brilliant mind solving its way to survival. You cannot outthink what was there before thought. Orochimaru's converted body stood in the chamber among the ruins of his research. His yellow eyes, now void black with red spirals, stared forward with the empty patience of everything the hive owned. Every forbidden technique in his arsenal, every curse seal variant, every body modification, every piece of stolen knowledge from every village he had ever infiltrated. All of it belonged to Naruto now. Two remained. At the rear of the chamber, the thing wearing Madara's face detached from its wall of biological matter. The Zetsu flesh peeled away from the stone, and the combined entity stepped forward, half white, half shadow, three eyes blazing with the accumulated power of the most legendary figure in shinobi history. Madara Uchiha did not wait. He did not speak. He did not posture. The complete body Susanoo erupted from his form in an instant, black-armored, enormous, its head scraping the cavern's ceiling as it tore through stone to achieve its full height. The ethereal warrior was perfected beyond what any Uchiha had ever produced. Its armor was thicker, its blades were sharper, its form burned with concentrated chakra that made the air around it scream. This was the Susanoo that had fought Hashirama at the Valley of the End, the guardian that had received a Biju as its armor, the avatar that had reshaped geography. The Susanoo swung both blades simultaneously, massive ethereal swords descending toward Naruto in a cross pattern designed to eliminate any direction of dodge. Behind the swing, Madara's Rinnegan activated Limbo. 4 invisible clones deployed into the dimension between dimensions, attacking from angles that existed outside normal perception. Naruto did not dodge the swords. The Necrosword rose and met the first blade at its midpoint. The ethereal steel cracked on contact, a fracture that raced from the point of impact to the hilt in a single breath, the Susanoo's weapon breaking apart as though it had struck something its existence was insufficient to withstand. The second blade followed the first, slamming down against the living armor of Naruto's shoulder and shattering upon impact, the ethereal energy dispersing in fragments that the void consumed before they could dissipate naturally. The Limbo clones arrived. 4 invisible Madaras struck from 4 impossible angles, each one carrying the full power of the original, each one operating in a dimension designed to be undetectable and unstoppable. Naruto's living armor exploded outward in all directions simultaneously, a sphere of expanding void that occupied every dimension within its radius. The Limbo clones existed in a border realm, a space between the physical and the spiritual. The void predated both. It filled the border realm the same way it filled everywhere else, completely. 4 invisible clones were caught in expanding blackness that ignored the dimensional barriers between them and the physical world. They were consumed in their own dimension, pulled into the void from within the Limbo plane itself, dragged out of existence by darkness that had been waiting in the space between spaces since before spaces were divided. Madara felt them die. 4 extensions of his will, severed simultaneously. His Rinnegan, the eye designed to perceive all things, to see the truth of reality's architecture, showed him what existed in the spaces he had been sending his clones to. The border dimension was already black. It had been black before he activated the technique. He had been sending his clones into the void's territory since the first one deployed. He abandoned Limbo, abandoned the Susanoo, its compromised form dissolving as he redirected his chakra entirely to offense. His hands formed seals at a speed that would have been invisible to anyone below cage level, and from his palms erupted a concentrated beam of truth-seeking ball material, the substance of fundamental nullification, condensed into a lance of pure destruction aimed directly at Naruto's core. The beam struck the armor. For one instant, less than a second, the truth-seeking material's nullification property interacted with the symbiote mass. The two substances met, and neither dominated immediately. The nullification tried to unmake the void at the atomic level. The void tried to consume the nullification at the conceptual level. The void won. It always won. Because nullification was still a concept. It was still something. A force applied with intention, built from chakra, designed by a mind that existed after light. The void was the absence of concepts. It existed before the idea of unmake had been invented. What the truth-seeking substance nullified, the abyss had already claimed. The beam disappeared into Naruto's chest and fed the hive. Madara's three eyes processed this result with the clarity they were designed for. The Rinnegan saw the truth. The Mangekyo saw the detail. Together, they showed him an equation he had spent his entire existence refusing to accept. There existed something bigger than Madara Uchiha. He activated the infinite Tsukuyomi. The Rinnegan blazed. The technique reached upward, toward the moon, toward the reflective surface designed to bounce the blinding light across the world and trap every living being in an endless dream. It was the culmination of his plan. The technique that Black Zetsu had spent a millennium engineering his revival to perform. The ultimate expression of the Otsutsuki lineage's power over this world. The technique reached the moon and found the void. The black moon drank the infinite Tsukuyomi's activation signal, the way it had drunk everything else directed at it since the day it was claimed. The reflective light that was supposed to blanket the world in Genjutsu entered the symbiote mass coating the lunar surface and disappeared. Consumed. Eaten. The technique designed to trap all of reality in a dream of light was swallowed by the entity that owned the mirror it needed. Madara stared upward through the destroyed ceiling of the cavern. His moon, his plan, consumed before it could execute. You tried to trap reality in light, Naruto said. He stood 10 feet from the half-Zetsu form of history's most arrogant shinobi. The necrosword rested at his side, patient, waiting, its anti-presence making the air between them scream at a frequency below hearing. I am what reality looked like before light arrived. Madara's expression, what could be read on a face half composed of artificial biology, carried something that might have been fury and might have been fascination. Even at the end, even facing the absolute, the part of him that was Madara Uchiha was offended rather than afraid. This world is mine, Madara said. His voice carried the same iron certainty it had always carried, the bone-deep conviction of a man who had shaped history according to his will. I spent a century engineering. Your century was a breath, Naruto said. Your plan was a candle in my dark. Black Zetsu, the fragment of Kaguya's will fused into Madara's body, made its move. It separated from the vessel, tearing itself free from the combined form in a desperate lunge toward the earth beneath them. Black Zetsu had survived 1,000 years through patience and concealment. It knew how to hide. It knew how to disappear into the ground and wait for a better moment. Its mother was coming. It had to survive long enough to... The necrosword struck the ground along Black Zetsu's path, a single downward slash that split the earth open for 100 meters in every direction. The ground parted, and in the gap, in the space between the severed halves of stone, the void waited. Absolute darkness filling the wound in the earth, reaching upward with tendrils that found Black Zetsu mid-flight and wrapped around it with the speed of a trap sprung after 1,000 years of patience. Black Zetsu screamed. 1,000 years of Kaguya's will, a millennia of patient manipulation, of engineering revolutions and betrayals and wars, of guiding the Uchiha clan toward the moment of her revival, condensed into a single shriek as the void consumed it. Every secret Black Zetsu carried, every memory of 1,000 years of scheming, every connection to Kaguya's sealed form, all of it became property of the hive in the space of that scream. The scream ended. Madara stood alone. His Zetsu half had been torn away, leaving him diminished, half-formed, his vessel compromised. The Rinnegan still blazed, the Mangekyo still spun. He still carried power that would have made him a god in any era of history. The symbiote mass reached him through the ground. Through the split earth that the necrosword had opened, it rose around his feet, climbing, coating, beginning the conversion with the same inevitability it always carried. Madara fought it. His chakra blazed. Six paths power concentrated in his remaining flesh, burning at output levels that would have liquefied lesser beings. He burned the darkness off his legs. It returned immediately, thicker, faster. He burned it again. It came back again. A cycle that repeated 4 times in 2 seconds. Each time the void returning stronger, because each burst of chakra Madara expelled became fuel. The 5th time, the void reached his waist before he could burn it back. The 6th time, his chest. The 7th time, his Rinnegan. Madara Uchiha's conversion was slow enough that he remained aware through the entire process. His divine eyes showed him everything, every detail of what was happening to him at the cellular level, the molecular level, the fundamental level. The Rinnegan processed the void's invasion with perfect clarity, showing him the truth of what consumed him. This was older than chakra, older than the sage who gave him these eyes, older than the mother of the sage, older than the species that birthed the mother, older than the planet they all lived on, older than the star the planet orbited. The last thing Madara Uchiha experienced before his will was subsumed was the understanding, complete, total, undeniable, that his Eye of the Moon plan had been a child's drawing on a wall that already belonged to someone else. His dream of infinite dominion had been a footnote in the story of something that had already won before he was born. His eyes went void black. Red spirals replaced the Rinnegan's rings and the Mangekyo's patterns. Every technique Madara Uchiha had ever possessed, the complete body Susanoo, the truth-seeking balls, the wood release, the limbo, the infinite Tsukuyomi's activation sequence, the 6 paths power, the combined might of a man who had defined what it meant to be the strongest shinobi who ever lived, all of it became the hive's property. Madara's converted body stood at attention. Void-eyed, waiting. One remained. Sasuke Uchiha stood at the far end of the destroyed chamber. The ceiling had been torn away by the Susanoo's initial deployment. The eclipse-darkened sky was visible above, the black moon and its red dragon emblem staring down into the exposed mountain complex, like an eye watching the final act of a play whose ending was written before the curtain rose. He had watched everything. Watched Kabuto fall in seconds. Watched Orochimaru die 7 times. Watched Madara, the legend, the impossible, the pinnacle of everything the Sharingan could achieve, consumed like everything else. Sasuke's Rinnegan spun. His eternal Mangekyo burned beside it, one eye purple-ringed, the other red-patterned, both carrying the full output of 6 paths chakra concentrated into a single human vessel. His body was wreathed in the purple lightning of his perfected Chidori variants. His Susanoo flickered around him in its complete form, armored in deep purple, armed with a bow and a blade, moving with a fluidity that exceeded any previous version. He stepped forward, toward Naruto, toward the thing that wore the face of the boy he had grown up beside, the classmate he had ignored, the rival he had never acknowledged until it was far too late for rivalry to matter. "I know what you are," Sasuke said. His voice was level, steady, carrying the flat certainty of a man who had made peace with his own death before the fight began. "I read the tablets, the presage records, the fragments from before the Otsutsuki arrived. I know you predate everything." Naruto regarded him. The void black eyes with their red spirals turned toward the last unconverted major figure in this world, with something in their depths, something that existed in the space between indifference and acknowledgement. "Then you know how this ends," Naruto said. "Yes." Sasuke's Susanoo solidified fully, the armored guardian reaching its maximum output, burning with chakra that cracked the stone beneath his feet. "But I choose how I arrived there." He attacked. The Susanoo moved first, its blade swinging in a horizontal arc that carried enough force to split a mountain, the ethereal steel reinforced with 6 path chakra that made it denser and sharper than any version any Uchiha had ever produced. Simultaneously, Sasuke's Rinnegan activated, a dimensional portal opening behind Naruto, a second portal opening above, a third to the left. Through each portal, attacks arrived. Amaterasu from one, a concentrated Chidori lance from another, gravitational repulsion from the third. 3 simultaneous assaults from 3 impossible angles, combined with the Susanoo's physical strike from the front. 4 directional, multi-layered, designed to overwhelm any single target defense. Naruto raised the Necrosword and slashed through the Susanoo's blade. the ethereal weapon splitting on contact with the god-killing edge, its chakra consumed at the point of separation. His armor absorbed the Chidori lance from the portal behind him, the lightning consumed into the void like a spark swallowed by deep water. The gravitational repulsion from the third portal pressed against his body and moved nothing. The void had mass beyond measurement, weight beyond the ability of gravity to affect. But the Amaterasu made contact. The black flames of the divine fire struck Naruto's armor, and something happened that had never happened before in this campaign. The symbiote mass reacted. The armor at the point of impact rippled, retreated for a fraction of a second. The god fire actually forcing the living abyss to pull back from the surface. 2 seconds. For 2 full seconds, Amaterasu burned against the king in black, and the void gave ground. The flames, the fire that burned everything, that could never be extinguished by normal means, that burned until its target was ash, found something in the symbiote mass that it could affect. The divine origin of the technique, the Mangekyo's connection to something older than normal chakra. A flame born from sacrifice and loss that carried weight the void recognized, however briefly, as relevant. 2 seconds was the longest any attack in this story had forced the hive to retreat. Sasuke pressed the opening. His body blurred, the speed of a man enhanced by 6 paths power, a man who had pushed his abilities to their absolute ceiling in preparation for this single moment. He appeared inside Naruto's guard in the instant the armor retreated. Chidori blazing in his palm, the lightning technique screaming at a magnitude that split the air around it into plasma. He drove the Chidori directly into the gap the Amaterasu had created. Lightning struck living shadow at the point of maximum vulnerability. For one instant, one brilliant, electric, impossible instant, Sasuke's technique made contact with something beneath the armor. His Rinnegan saw it. A flash of the form beneath the void, the body that had once been 8 years old, that had hung in chains in a cavern, that had been stabbed by 7 blades and woken up as something else. Then the gap closed. The armor recovered in the 3rd second, the living abyss surging back across the surface, consuming the Amaterasu flames, swallowing the Chidori's lightning, and Sasuke's hand was inside it. His arm, elbow deep in the living void, his Chidori still screaming but muffled now, contained, being eaten from the outside in. He pulled back. His arm came free, but blackened to the wrist. The symbiote mass had entered through the contact point, embedding itself in the chakra pathways of his hand. He burned it off with concentrated lightning, his own body's electricity cooking the infection before it could spread. It cost him the hand. The flesh below the wrist charred and died, self-immolated by his own technique to prevent conversion. Sasuke stood with a smoking stump where his left hand had been, and did not flinch. He reformed the Susanoo with his remaining hand, single arm but undimmed, the ethereal guardian wrapping around him again. He opened 6-dimensional portals simultaneously, through each one a different attack, sustained Amaterasu in concentrated streams rather than single bursts. The divine fire poured through the portals in rivers, 6 streams of burning black flame converging on Naruto from every direction, creating a cage of god fire that closed from all angles. The fire closed around Naruto, engulfed him. For 3 seconds the king in black stood inside a sphere of Amaterasu, the divine flame burning against the armor at every point of its surface simultaneously. The symbiote mass rippled. It retreated inward, pulling closer to the body beneath, compressing, the fire forcing it to concentrate rather than spread. 3 seconds. Sasuke had bought 3 seconds more than anyone else in this world's history. And then the fire died, consumed, all of it. 6 rivers of Amaterasu drained into the living abyss. The armor expanding outward again, growing larger, denser, fed by the divine fire it had eaten. The void had analyzed the god flame in those 3 seconds, had understood its structure, had found the gap between its divine origin and its practical manifestation, and had eaten through that gap. Amaterasu would never work again. The hive had adapted. Sasuke watched his strongest technique be rendered obsolete in real time. His Rinnegan showed him the adaptation occurring at the structural level, the void learning, evolving, incorporating his own fire into itself. He understood what he was seeing. He attacked anyway, everything he had remaining, every technique at maximum output. Chidori variants that split mountains, planetary devastation through the Rinnegan, pulling massive sections of terrain toward a gravitational core, trying to bury Naruto under a planetoid's worth of material. Susanoo arrows fired through dimensional portals at speeds that cross the gap between thought and impact in zero time. Six paths enhanced taijutsu, his remaining hand and both feet striking with physical force that cracked the dimensional barriers between the attack plane and the adjacent dimensions. He fought for 30 seconds. 30 seconds of the most talented shinobi alive, giving everything his body and his bloodline and his training had ever produced. 30 seconds of a man who had spent his entire existence pushing toward the absolute peak of human capability, demonstrating exactly what that peak looked like. It was beautiful, in the way that last things are beautiful. The way a star is beautiful in the moment before it goes dark, all of its remaining fuel burning at once, all of its light concentrated into a final brilliant display. Naruto did not draw the necro sword. He reached out with his hand. The symbiote mass responded to the gesture, expanding outward from his body in a wave that found the Susanoo's surface and pressed against it from every direction simultaneously. The ethereal armor that had protected Sasuke through everything, that had deflected techniques that reshaped landscapes, that had been refined to its absolute peak through months of preparation, met the living abyss at every point of its surface. The Susanoo lasted 7 seconds longer than Madara's had. 7 seconds of the void pressing inward, consuming the ethereal energy, eating through the armor's layers one by one. The Susanoo's blade arm dissolved first, then the bow arm, then the chest plate, then the helmet. Each piece consumed and absorbed, the technique that defined the Uchiha lineage devoured with the same patient inevitability that had consumed everything else. Sasuke stood bare. The Susanoo was gone. His chakra reserves were depleted beyond functioning. The months of preparation spent in 30 seconds of maximum output. He had one hand. He had his eyes. He had nothing else. Naruto's hand closed around his face. The same grip, the same gesture, the one used on Pain, on Toneri, on every being that the void had deemed worthy of this specific treatment. The personal touch, the direct conversion, the intimate claiming that said, "I am taking you myself rather than sending the tide." "You trained your entire life to become a weapon," Naruto said. His voice was close, speaking from inches away, from the void black eyes looking through his own fingers at the Rinnegan spinning desperately beneath his palm. How unfortunate that weapons corrode in the dark. The symbiote mass poured from his palm, into Sasuke's eyes, into the sockets of the Rinnegan and the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. The divine eyes, the pinnacle of the Uchiha bloodline, refined through generations of evolution and sacrifice, fought the infection with everything the sage's bloodline could produce. The Rinnegan pushed back. Its gravitational manipulation tried to repel the darkness at the cellular level, pushing the void away from each nerve, each receptor, each connection in the optical system. The Mangekyo spun at maximum speed, its pattern recognition trying to find a weakness in the invading substance, trying to cast genjutsu on the void itself. 12 seconds. 12 seconds longer than Hashirama had managed. 12 seconds of the most powerful eyes in human history fighting their last battle. A war waged at the microscopic level between divine genetics and primordial darkness. The genetics lost. They always lost. Because genetics were built after light, after creation, after the universe decided what patterns meant and how they would be assembled. The void had been there before the first pattern was drawn, and it would be there after the last one was erased. Sasuke's eyes changed. The Rinnegan, still spinning, still carrying every ability it had ever possessed, still perfect in its function and scope, shifted. The pupils went void black. Red spirals replaced the pattern at the center. The eternal Mangekyo beside it followed, the unique pinwheel pattern of Sasuke's evolved Sharingan maintained in its outer ring, but with the void spirals burning at its core. Every Uchiha technique, every Rinnegan application, Amaterasu, Susanoo Kagutsuchi, Shinra Tensei, Chibaku Tensei, dimensional manipulation, 6 paths power, the full accumulated might of the most talented shinobi this world had produced, absorbed, owned, belonging to the hive. Sasuke's body straightened. His one-handed form stood at attention, void-eyed, patient, empty of the iron will that had driven it moments before. The last human who had chosen to fight now stood in line with the rest. The last free human life on the planet was gone. Naruto stepped out of the destroyed mountain complex. Above him, the eclipse held. Below him, the converted world pulsed with the hive's rhythm. Around him, on every continent and in every ocean, and at the summit of every mountain and in the depths of every trench, the void owned everything. He rose. Wings of living abyss spread from his back, enormous, stretching hundreds of meters, each feather a tendril of pure void that cut the overcast sky as they moved. He ascended through the atmosphere, through the layers of air that thinned and failed, through the boundary between sky and the emptiness beyond. He stood in space above the black world, and from the void between dimensions, from a place that existed outside the normal architecture of reality, something pushed through. It came like a pressure wave, felt rather than seen, a disturbance in the fabric of the spiritual plane that made the entire hive mind register its approach simultaneously. Every converted being on the planet's surface tilted their heads skyward in the same instant. 1 billion void black eyes all looking at the same spot in the sky where something was arriving from beyond. Light, a form of light, an old man appeared in the space above the atmosphere. His manifestation was different from everything that had come before. He did not step through a portal or descend from a ship or arrive through any physical medium. He simply existed where he had chosen to exist, his form assembled from concentrated spiritual energy so dense it was functionally physical. Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the sage of 6 paths, he wore the robes of his legend, white and flowing, carrying a staff whose 6-ringed tip chimed with every movement. His beard fell to his chest, white with age that predated the founding of the first village. His eyes, the Rinnegan, blazing purple and ringed, and carrying the weight of a man who had divided the 10 tails with his bare hands. Fixed on Naruto with the expression of someone arriving at an inevitable appointment, 10 truth-seeking balls orbited his form. Each one a sphere of fundamental nullification, chakra-destroying material compressed into shapes that unraveled ninjutsu on contact, that broke down matter at the atomic level, that represented the highest expression of the 6 paths, command over reality. Hagoromo looked down at the world below, at the blackened surface, at the converted populations, at the symbiote dragons circling in the overcast. His expression did not carry defeat. It carried resolution. The look of a man who had watched his entire legacy consumed and had come to face the consumer directly. I built the chakra system to give this world a chance, Hagoromo said. His voice carried across the vacuum, spiritual energy creating its own medium, his words arriving through the fundamental fabric of existence rather than through air. I divided the 10 tails to prevent any one entity from holding absolute power. I created the Biju to distribute strength across the world. I gave humanity a light to follow. He raised his staff. The 6 rings chimed, each one resonating at a frequency that carried the weight of everything the sage had built across his legendary lifetime. And now I have come to face what my light awakened when it shone into the dark. Naruto floated opposite him. The necrosword hung at his side. His living armor rippled in the solar wind that reached them past the black moon's shadow, particles of light striking the void and being absorbed on contact. You built your system on stolen territory, Naruto said. Chakra is light. Light is infection. You gave infection to a world that was mine before your mother drew her first breath. Hagoromo's truth-seeking balls moved. They arranged themselves in a formation around his body, a defensive matrix that covered every angle of approach, each sphere positioned to intercept anything directed at the sage from any direction. The arrangement was perfect. The product of a mind that had mastered the fundamental forces of reality and deployed them with the wisdom of centuries. He struck first. 3 truth-seeking balls launched simultaneously, accelerating to speeds that ignored physical limits, each one trailing destruction in its wake. The first came from the left, a sphere of nullification aimed at the connection point between Naruto's armor and his body. The second from above, targeting the crown of the head, the point where the hive mind's consciousness concentrated. The third from below, aimed at the necrosword's resting position, attempting to unmake the weapon before it could be drawn. Naruto moved. A single step to the right, If direction meant anything in space, that carried him beyond the convergence point of all three spheres. The truth-seeking balls passed through the space he had occupied and continued outward, their trajectories carrying them away from their target. Hagoromo redirected them. All three reversed course in the same instant, pulled back by the sage's will, curving through space in arcs that brought them toward Naruto from new angles. He added 4 more to the assault, 7 spheres now, moving in patterns that covered the maximum possible approach vectors, each one independently guided, each one carrying enough destructive force to unmake a mountain. Naruto raised the Necrosword. He swung it in a single broad arc, a sweep that covered his entire forward hemisphere. The blade's edge met the incoming truth-seeking balls, and the result was immediate. The spheres split on the Necrosword. 3 of them came apart along the blade's path, divided in 2, each half tumbling away in opposite directions as the weapon that had killed gods cut through the highest expression of Six Paths power with the same ease it cut through everything else. These were chakra-destroying orbs that unmade ninjutsu, that nullified matter, that broke down anything built on intention into its component nothing. But the Necrosword was older than intention, older than matter, older than the concept of nullification itself. The blade existed in the space below all concepts, the primordial dark that was present before anyone invented the idea of breaking things apart. The truth-seeking balls were the universe's best demolition tool. The Necrosword was older than the building they were designed to tear down. The remaining 4 spheres met the same fate in the second swing. 7 truth-seeking balls, the fundamental weapon of the 6 paths, reduced to half fragments drifting in space. Hagoromo's expression did not change, but the rate of his staff's movement increased. He deployed his remaining 3 orbs in a different configuration, merging them into a single mass of concentrated nullification, a sphere 10 times larger than the individuals, burning with enough destructive potential to unmake a small moon. He launched it. The combined orb crossed the space between them, faster than physical objects should have been able to move, propelled by the sage's will rather than by physics, arriving with the weight of everything the father of chakra could produce in a single attack. Naruto caught it. His free hand closed around the merged truth-seeking mass. The orb pressed against his palm, nullification energy pouring into the living armor, attempting to unmake the symbiote material at its most fundamental level. The void surface rippled where the orb pressed, a visual effect like the surface of deep water disturbed by a stone drop from incredible height. The ripples spread. Then they stopped. Then they reversed. The truth-seeking mass shrank in Naruto's grip. Its energy drained, consumed by the palm that held it, eaten by the void that acknowledged the orb's existence and found it insufficient. The most fundamental weapon the sage had ever created diminished between Naruto's fingers until it was the size of a marble, then a grain of sand, then nothing at all. Consumed. Added. The principle of nullification itself, the concept of unmaking, absorbed into the hive's arsenal. Hagoromo hung in space with his defenses stripped. His staff still chimed, the 6 rings still resonating, but his primary weapons were gone. Consumed or cut, every one of them. He drove forward with the staff itself. The weapon blazed with spiritual energy, the concentrated will of the most powerful sage this world had produced, channeled through an implement that had been forged in the division of the 10 tails. He struck at Naruto with everything that remained. The staff hit the Necroswords flat. The rings shattered. One by one, from the tip downward, each one cracking and crumbling and falling away as the anti-energy of the blade radiated through the weapon's structure. The wood beneath the rings blackened. The spiritual energy saturating the staff was consumed layer by layer, from the point of contact downward. Hagoromo released the weapon before the corruption reached his hands. The staff drifted away, dying, its ancient significance reduced to corroding wood. The sage of 6 paths looked at the king in black across the void between them. His Rinnegan processed what stood before him with the absolute clarity they were built for. "I have slain celestials," Naruto said. The words traveled through space on a medium of pure void, carried by darkness rather than air, arriving in Hagoromo's perception through the same channels that carried the absence of everything. You are the child of a woman who came to this world on borrowed time. Her time expired. Yours has followed. The Necrosword moved, one diagonal line, a single cut that crossed the space between them at a speed that light could not outrun, because light traveled through space and the Necrosword cut through it. The blade's edge found the Sage of Six Paths' manifested form and passed through it from shoulder to hip. The projection did not bleed. It did not scream. Hagoromo Otsutsuki's spiritual manifestation came apart along the line of the cut, his form separating into two halves that drifted apart in the vacuum. The spiritual energy that comprised him scattered outward in a burst of dispersing light, but his voice remained. For one moment, one final transmission carried on the residual energy of a being who had existed for longer than recorded history. Hagoromo's words echoed through the spiritual plane. She will come, and she was always stronger than I was. The light dispersed. The sage's energy scattered outward and was consumed by the darkness that surrounded everything, absorbed into the hive, adding the foundational understanding of chakra itself to Naruto's arsenal. Every six paths technique, every fragment of the sage's divine power that had been distributed through his children and his students across 1,000 years, consolidated now. Owned, the void possessed the roots of the very infection it had declared war on. Naruto hung in space above the converted world. The Necrosword rested at his side. Below him, the planet was complete, entirely his, every soul, every stone, every drop of water carrying the void's signature. Above him, the black moon stared down with its burning emblem. He waited. The sage's final words had been a warning and a promise. She came. The dimensional barrier between realities tore open like a wound in the sky. A rift appeared, enormous, stretching across miles of space, its edges burning with an energy so ancient and so concentrated that the converted atmosphere below it caught fire on a spiritual level. The hive symbiote dragons nearest to the rift pulled back. The first involuntary movement the hive had displayed since its creation, a reflexive retreat from something their converted instincts registered as significant. From the rift, hands emerged. White and enormous and feminine, each finger the length of a skyscraper, each nail sharp enough to seem like it could scratch the surface of reality itself. The hands gripped the edges of the dimensional tier and pulled it wider. Kaguya Otsutsuki pushed herself through from her sealed dimension. She had been imprisoned for 1,000 years, sealed away by her own sons in a dimension of her own creation, trapped behind walls of the very chakra she had brought to this world. Black Zetsu had been her instrument of escape, the fragment of will she had left behind to engineer her revival. But Black Zetsu was gone now, consumed. Its knowledge absorbed into the hive. What brought her back was simpler and more terrible. The void's expansion had reached her sealed dimension through the spiritual plane. The darkness had leaked through the walls of her prison, entering through the same channels that Black Zetsu would have used to free her. And the moment it touched the barriers of her seal, those barriers became visible to her in a way they had never been before. The darkness outlined them, made them obvious, made them breakable. She broke them with her bare hands and came through with the fury of something caged for a millennium. Her humanoid form hung in space above the converted world, white hair streaming behind her for miles, three eyes blazing, the Byakugan pair seeing everything in every direction simultaneously, the Rinne's Sharingan on her forehead burning with the combined power of every dojutsu ever recorded. She wore robes of white and gold that moved against the vacuum as though they existed in their own atmospheric system. Her body radiated chakra at levels that made the atmosphere below ripple. The sheer weight of her power pressing down against the planet's surface from orbital distance. She was enormous in scope. The first being to ever wield chakra on this world, the progenitor of all dojutsu, the consumer of the divine fruit, the mother of all shinobi, the rabbit goddess whose name had been erased from history because even the memories of her terrified those who held them, her three eyes fixed on Naruto, on the void, on the entity that had consumed her world, her children's legacy, her chakra system, her revival instrument, her everything. She did not speak. She had never been one for words. She attacked. The Rinne's Sharingan on her forehead blazed and reality tore apart around her in every direction. Dimensional portals opened. Dozens of them, hundreds, each one a doorway into a different dimension she had created across 10,000 years of divine existence. Through each portal, terrain erupted outward, the lava dimension's magma pouring through one, the ice dimension's absolute cold blasting through another, the gravity dimension's crushing force emanating through a third. She weaponized her dimensions simultaneously, turning each pocket reality into an artillery piece aimed at the void. The assault was overwhelming in scope. 100-dimensional weapons firing simultaneously, each one carrying enough force to reshape continents, each one drawing from a separate pocket of reality that Kaguya had spent millennia filling with accumulated power. Lava and ice and gravity and lightning and void of her own and divine flame and dimensional shearing and pure kinetic force, all of it converging on the point in space where Naruto floated. The converted atmosphere below ignited under the crossfire. The planet's surface cracked in places where stray dimensional energy struck. Even the hive's mass, the living void coating the world, rippled under the peripheral effects of Kaguya's assault. Naruto spread his wings wide. The living abyss that composed them expanded, growing, stretching, spreading outward until the wings covered a radius that matched Kaguya's portal array. The dimensional attacks struck the spread wings and each one was absorbed. Lava entered the void and was consumed. Its heat fed to the hive. Ice made contact and was swallowed, its cold becoming nothing inside the abyss. Gravity pressed against the void and found something that gravity could not affect, because gravity operated on mass and the void predated the concept of weight. Every attack, every dimension, every piece of accumulated power that Kaguya had stored across 10 millennia, consumed on contact with wings that had been designed to drink the output of gods. She felt it. Every dimension she poured through her portals was diminished by what the void ate. Her reserves, vast beyond human measurement, drained through the portals faster than she could close them. She sealed the dimensional doorways one by one, cutting off the flow, preserving what remained. She descended instead, directly, her body blazing with the full output of a being who held a Biju inside her. The ten-tailed chakra concentrated in her divine form, a reservoir of power so immense that releasing it all at once would have cracked the planet in half. Her hand struck, palm first, driven by a body that moved at speeds gods should not have been able to achieve. Her open hand struck Naruto's chest with the full force of everything she was. The ten tails, power concentrated into a single point of impact, enough energy to consume the sun itself, focused into a strike measured in centimeters. The armor rippled. The impact point on Naruto's chest compressed inward, a handprint-shaped depression in the living void, where Kaguya's palm pressed with force that defied description. The symbiote mass resisted, absorbing energy as fast as it was delivered, converting the divine power into growth, into fuel, into strength. But Kaguya was pouring faster than the armor could eat. For a single impossible instant, a fraction of a second that would never be repeated, the flow of energy exceeded the void's intake capacity. The handprint deepened. The armor at that point thinned to nothing, and for 1/2 second, Kaguya's palm touched the body beneath. Then the hive compensated. 1 billion converted beings on the planet below simultaneously contributed their absorbed energy upward through the hive mind, feeding the armor at the point of stress, reinforcing the void with the accumulated power of an entire world's consumed population. The handprint filled. The gap closed. The armor surged back with the strength of everything the hive had ever eaten. Kaguya's arm was inside the void up to her elbow. The living abyss closed around it, climbed, spread upward along her divine flesh, the symbiote mass finding purchase on the progenitor's skin and beginning the process it applied to everything it touched. Kaguya's free hand tore at the spreading black. Her fingers, sharp enough to cut dimensional barriers, raked the void from her arm. The substance came away in strings that she flung into space. It reformed immediately, tendrils returning to her body faster than she could clear them, each one thicker and more insistent than the last. She fired ash-killing bones from her free palm, 12 of them, each one carrying the power to disintegrate anything they struck at the molecular level, each one propelled by divine force aimed at Naruto's face from point-blank range. The bones struck the armor and were consumed mid-flight. their molecular structure broken down and absorbed before they could complete their journey from Kaguya's palm to their target. She opened a portal behind her, attempting to retreat, to pull her arm free, to separate from the consuming darkness and attack from a distance. The portal opened into her sealed personal dimension, the deepest one, the one she kept locked behind everything else. Naruto stepped through it with her. They stood together in Kaguya's innermost dimension, a space she had built across 10,000 years. Every atom of it, her own chakra, crystallized into permanence. The sky was her color, the ground was her will, the air was her breath. This was the closest thing to a god's heart that existed in physical space. He raised the necrosword. "You brought me somewhere made entirely of chakra," he said. The words carried the weight they always carried, ancient, certain, sovereign. The tone of something that had seen divine dimensions before and found them all the same, made of light, made of infection, made of something that fed the void. The necrosword descended, one swing, downward, into the ground of Kaguya's most sacred dimension. The fracture started at the point of impact, a crack in reality that spread outward from the blade's entry like a stone dropped into frozen water. The crack branched and multiplied, racing outward across the dimension's floor in every direction, splitting the crystallized chakra that comprised this space. The fracture reached the walls, climbed them, crossed the ceiling. The entire dimension was fracturing, coming apart at its foundational layer, because the necrosword had cut the concept it was built on. Kaguya felt her dimension dying, the space she had retreated to when her son sealed her, the last place she had felt safe, the core of her personal reality, was breaking apart around her. She attacked with everything remaining. The full output of the Ten Tails' power, concentrated through her divine form, unleashed in a single omnidirectional blast that expanded from her body in a sphere of white light. It was everything. Every bit of chakra she had accumulated across 10,000 years of existence, the total sum of the most powerful being born in this universe, released in a single instant. The blast struck Naruto, and the void absorbed it. The light entered the darkness and was consumed. The heat entered the cold and was extinguished. The force entered the stillness and was negated. 10,000 years of divine accumulation, the greatest reservoir of power any single being in this world had ever held, drained into the abyss like water into sand. Kaguya hung in the fracturing remains of her dimension, empty. Her chakra reserves, bottomless for 10 millennia, were depleted. The blast she had unleashed contained everything, and the void had eaten everything. Naruto caught her wrist. The living abyss poured from his grip into her divine flesh. Kaguya was vast. The amount of void required to convert a being of her scope exceeded anything the hive had processed in a single consumption. The darkness moved through her slowly, inch by inch, filling her divine channels with something older than the divinity they were built to carry. She fought it. Her Reincarnation spun at frequencies that made the fracturing dimension blur. Her remaining chakra, what little had regenerated in the seconds since her blast, concentrated around the infection points, trying to burn the void out of her system. She tore 3 symbiote tendrils free of her body with her bare hand and threw them into space. She opened 2 new dimensions in 10 seconds, fresh spaces filled with her power, and tried to flush the darkness out through sheer volume. Every burst of chakra she expelled became fuel. The void consumed her resistance and grew from it, spreading faster through her body with every attempt she made to push it back. The fundamental paradox that had killed everything before her. Fighting the void meant feeding it. Running meant nothing because the void was everywhere. And standing still meant accepting the inevitable. The Reincarnation dimmed. 3 eyes, the most powerful optical suite ever to exist in this world, losing their light one by one. The Byakugan pair went first, their all-seeing white going void black as the infection claimed the optical nerves. The Reincarnation lasted 8 seconds longer, the central eye fighting with the accumulated divine power of 10 millennia of evolution. 8 seconds. Then it too went dark. 3 eyes opened, void black. Red spirals turning in depths that had contained everything and now contained the void. The progenitor of all chakra, the original vessel of the 10 tails, the source of every dojutsu ever manifested in human history. the rabbit goddess whose power had defined the upper limit of what was possible in this world. Absorbed, owned, her 10,000 years of divine accumulation added to the hive, the dimension around them stopped fracturing. The darkness filled the cracks, pouring into every fault line the Necrosword had created, converting the crystallized chakra of Kaguya's domain into extension of the void. The dimension itself became hive territory, another pocket of reality claimed, another space that now belonged to the king in black. Kaguya's converted form stood in the void that had been her domain. 3 eyes staring forward, void black, red spiraled, patient. Naruto looked at what he held, the most powerful single entity this world's history had produced, the origin point of every threat he had consumed on his way to her. Every dojutsu, every technique, every bloodline, every divine ability that the shinobi world had spent 1,000 years building on. All of it traced back to her, and now all of it, root and branch, belonged to the void. From outside the dimension, through the hive mind that now stretched across every inch of a converted planet and into every pocket dimension connected to it, he felt new presences approaching. The hive's sensory network, 1 billion pairs of converted eyes and 1 billion sets of converted instincts, registered the disturbance at the edge of the atmosphere. Ships, coming from above, from beyond the planet's orbital space, from the direction of stars that had never concerned the shinobi world because the shinobi world had never looked up far enough to see them. More Otsutsuki, coming from the void between worlds. Naruto left Kaguya's converted dimension through a portal the void opened in reality's fabric. He emerged in space above the planet, standing on nothing, standing on darkness, standing on the void that existed between everything and had always been his floor. The fleet arrived. Celestial spheres descended through the outer atmosphere in formation. Dozens of them, each one a vessel carrying an Otsutsuki member at the height of their power. They came in a pattern that spoke of military precision, an organized response to the anomaly that their divine tree network had reported. The network that connected every world the clan had ever visited, every planet they had planted a tree on, every piece of their empire across the stars. It had been transmitting something wrong from this world for weeks. The tree had gone dark. Its chakra output had inverted. Something was consuming their property. They came to correct the error. The fleet spread out as it entered the planet's orbital space, each vessel taking a position that provided overlapping fields of coverage, the formation designed to contain whatever threat they found and eliminate it through combined force. Communication pulses traveled between the ships in the clan's ancient language, tactical data shared at the speed of thought through the divine tree's interstellar connection. Through that connection, Naruto could already feel them. The divine tree network was corrupted, had been corrupted since the moment the hive consumed its physical trunk on the planet below. The network still functioned, still connected the Otsutsuki to each other, still carried signals between their vessels, but it carried something else now too. Something riding beneath their communications. Something waiting. The senior divine, the fleet's commander, an Otsutsuki whose age exceeded Kaguya's by centuries, stepped from the flagship's surface into the vacuum. His form was enormous in its presence, a being who had consumed the chakra fruit of 100 worlds, whose body contained the accumulated divine energy of an empire spanning solar systems. His eyes, an evolved form of the Byakugan that saw across dimensions and into the future simultaneously, fixed on the black planet below with an expression of imperial displeasure. He spoke into the communication network. His words traveled through the divine tree's channels to every vessel in the fleet. Harvest what remains, consume the corruption, reset the world. From every celestial sphere, beams erupted downward, harvesting techniques designed to extract all chakra from a planetary surface, the standard Otsutsuki protocol for processing a mature world. Dozens of beams striking the planet's surface simultaneously, each one built to drain everything of value from the world below and channel it back to the fleet. The beams hit the symbiote mass coating the planet. For one instant, the harvesting energy tried to extract, tried to pull upward, to drain, to take. Then the flow reversed. Every beam, every single harvesting channel that the fleet had extended toward the planet became an intake pipe. The void traveled up the beams. The darkness climbed the energy channels, racing from the planet's surface upward through the harvesting arrays, entering each vessel through the very systems designed to consume. 3 of the smaller celestial spheres went dark in the first second. Their exteriors shifted from the pale gold of Otsutsuki technology to the matte black of the void, the living abyss consuming their hulls from the entry point of the reversed harvesting beam outward, converting divine technology with the same efficiency it converted everything else. The senior divine severed the beams, cut the harvesting arrays, isolated the infected vessels. His response was immediate and intelligent, the reflexes of a commander who had fought corruption on other worlds. But the divine tree network was already compromised. The communication pulses traveling between the vessels, the tactical data, the coordination signals, the fundamental connection that bound the fleet together, carried the void signature beneath their content. Every signal received by every vessel in the fleet carried a payload of living darkness in its structure. The network they relied on for unity had become an infection vector. Naruto appeared among the fleet. He did not fly toward them. He did not cross the distance between his position and theirs. He was simply there, manifesting from the void that existed between their vessels, stepping out of the darkness of space itself as though it were a door he had always held the key to. He stood on nothing between the flagship and its escorts, the necrosword in his hand, his armor spreading shadows across the vacuum. The senior divine turned. His evolved Byakugan perceived the threat instantly, seeing Naruto's form in perfect detail, seeing the void that composed him, seeing the depth of what existed behind those red spiral eyes. What his future sight showed him was something he refused to acknowledge for the half second before it became reality. He attacked, a technique designed to collapse a star, gravitational manipulation at a scale that dwarfed anything planetary, forces meant to crush celestial bodies into dying density, the kind of power that the Otsutsuki used to prepare worlds for harvesting. The gravitational field closed around Naruto, pressed inward from every direction, a sphere of collapsing force that should have compressed anything at its center into a point of infinite density. The kind of pressure that forged stars and crushed planets and ended solar systems. Naruto raised his free hand and caught the technique. The gravitational field met his palm and stopped. The force, the absolute star-crushing, world-ending force, pressed against his hand and moved nothing. The void existed before gravity was born, before forces were named, before the universe invented the concept of mass interacting with mass. What gravity pressed against was something that had stood in the void before pressure was a word. He closed his fist. The gravitational technique crumpled, compressed into a ball of spent force that Naruto held between his fingers for one instant before the living armor absorbed it, consuming the energy, adding the gravitational manipulation to the hive's expanding arsenal. He drove the necrosword through the flagship's hull. The blade extended from his hand, stretching, growing, reaching from his position in space through the vessel's outer shell, through its interior, through the divine space that its internal architecture contained, and out through the opposite side. The necrosword pierced the flagship from stem to stern, a single line of absolute black through the golden hull of the most powerful vessel in the fleet. The flagship died from the inside. The necrosword's passage left a corridor of void through its structure, a line of consumed material that spread outward from the cut, the living abyss pouring from the blade's path into the vessel's chambers. The Otsutsuki within, a crew of divine beings, each one powerful enough to consume a world independently, found the void racing through their ship's corridors faster than they could react. The senior divine turned from his position outside the flagship and watched his vessel go dark. His evolved Byakugan showed him every detail of what was happening within, his crew being consumed, their divine power absorbed, their eyes going void black one by one. He raised his hands. From his palms, a combined technique erupted, the accumulated power of 100 consumed worlds concentrated into a single blast aimed at Naruto from 10 meters away. Every piece of divine energy the senior divine had eaten across centuries of harvest released in a beam meant to reduce anything it struck to its component atoms. "You try to burn the void?" Naruto said. The words arrived before the beam did, carried through the darkness between them with the certainty of something that had heard this question a million times. The beam struck his armor and fed it. The senior divine watched his entire reserve of accumulated divine energy drain into the void that stood before him. Centuries of harvesting, 100 worlds of consumed power, emptied in the space between one breath and the next. Naruto's hand closed around the senior divine's face. The grip was familiar, the same one, always the same one. The conversion of the most powerful Otsutsuki present lasted 30 seconds. Half a minute for the void to fill the body of a being who had eaten more worlds than any other creature in the fleet. His divine form fought, his evolved genetics pushing back, his accumulated power burning against the infection, his will screaming against the erasure of centuries of identity. 30 seconds. Then his eyes opened void black and red spiraled through the divine tree network, the connection that still bound the fleet's remaining vessels together. The conversion signal transmitted. It traveled outward from the consumed flagship, through the communication channels, through the divine tree's interstellar pathways, carrying the void's signature to every connected Otsutsuki everywhere. The remaining fleet members received the signal. Their vessels, communication arrays, designed to accept divine tree transmissions without question, built on the assumption that the network was safe, opened and allowed the corrupted data to enter their systems. Darkness poured through the divine tree network. Ship by ship, the fleet went dark. Their golden hulls shifted to black. Their crews went silent, each one converted through the very communication system they relied on for unity. The formation that had descended with the precision of an organized military force now drifted in orbit. Every vessel claimed, every divine being consumed, every piece of accumulated Otsutsuki power across the fleet absorbed into the hive, and the network kept transmitting. The divine tree's interstellar pathways, the channels that connected every Otsutsuki world, every harvested planet, every piece of the clan's empire across the universe, carried the void outward from this system. The corrupted signal traveled at the speed of divine communication, instant, crossing distances that light would take millennia to cover, reaching every node in the network simultaneously. On 100 worlds across the galaxy, divine trees received the signal. Their root systems, buried deep in planetary cores, feeding on accumulated chakra for millennia, accepted the transmission. The void entered through the channels that chakra had built. The infection had found a highway to everything. Naruto rose above the converted fleet. The celestial spheres, now flying in formation under his command, orbited the black planet below. The divine tree network, which had taken the Otsutsuki thousands of years to build across the stars, now served the hive. He could feel it spreading through the network's pathways, reaching outward across distances that should have taken ages to cross, finding new worlds, new civilizations, new systems that the Otsutsuki had connected to the tree's root system, each one receiving the darkness through channels they trusted, each one being consumed from within. He stood in space and watched his dominion expand across the stars without requiring his physical presence. The void moved through the network like blood through veins, flowing outward from this planet along every connected pathway, reaching every world the Otsutsuki had ever touched. On a planet 3,000 light years from the shinobi world, a civilization that had developed interstellar travel through their divine tree's energy felt the tree's output change. The warm golden glow of accumulated chakra shifted, darkened. The energy flowing from the tree's core reversed direction, pulling inward rather than radiating outward, drawing everything toward it. The tree's branches went black, then its trunk, then its roots. And from the infected root system, the void spread outward into the planet's soil, into the water table, into the foundations of cities built beside the tree for millennia. A civilization that had never heard of the shinobi world found the darkness rising from their foundations, creeping upward through their streets, climbing their towers, reaching for their people with the same patient hunger that had consumed everything else. They fought. They had their own warriors, their own techniques, power systems built on the divine tree's energy, refined across centuries of development, wielded by champions who had defended their world against threats for generations. The darkness consumed them in hours. Their techniques fed it. Their power accelerated their own end. Every defense they erected became food. Every blast they fired became fuel. Naruto felt each world fall through the hive mind, felt each civilization's accumulated knowledge and power flow into him across the divine tree network. Techniques he had never encountered, power systems entirely alien to what the shinobi world had developed, technologies that operated on principles he had never needed to learn. All of it becoming his. All of it adding to an arsenal that had already surpassed any measurement. 100 worlds, then 1,000. The divine tree network was vast. The Otsutsuki had been harvesting across the universe for tens of thousands of years. Every world they had visited was connected. Every world received the signal. On a world that orbited a dying star, a species that had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure energy patterns in a matrix of crystallized thought, received the void through their divine tree and discovered that energy was simply another form of light. The darkness consumed them the way it consumed everything, completely. On a water world where the dominant civilization lived beneath kilometers of ocean, building cities of pressure-forged coral and channeling their divine tree's energy through liquid mediums, the darkness arrived through the roots that reached the ocean floor. The water turned black. An entire ocean, billions of cubic kilometers of liquid, became an extension of the hive in a single tidal pulse on a gas giant where sentient storms had formed around a divine tree planted in the planet's core millennia ago. The void spread through the atmosphere itself. Thinking storms that had existed for millions of years found their thoughts going dark, their patterns rewritten, their consciousness absorbed into something vaster than they had ever imagined. World after world after world. Naruto stood above the shinobi planet, the world where this body had been born, where a boy had hung in chains and woken up as something else, and felt the universe shrinking. The distance between owned and unowned grew smaller with every passing hour. The divine tree network was efficient. It reached everywhere the Otsutsuki had ever been, and the Otsutsuki had been everywhere. The hive mind expanded to a scale that strained the metaphysical architecture of reality. 1,000 worlds of knowledge, 1,000 civilizations worth of techniques and technologies, and accumulated understanding. Every warrior on every world that fell added their expertise. Every champion's power was cataloged. Every unique ability, systems that had developed independently across millennia on isolated worlds, became property of the void. Then something pushed back. At the edge of the expanding darkness, at the furthest point the divine tree network had carried the void, something enormous registered in the hive's sensory awareness. A presence that did not retreat, a presence that did not convert on contact, a presence that the void recognized. Light, old light, the kind that had existed since the beginning, since the very first instant that something decided the void should have a boundary. They came through the fabric of reality at the edge of the galaxy, tearing through from whatever dimension they occupied when they were not actively building. Their forms entered normal space, and the stars around them brightened, responding to the presence of their creators, the light recognizing its source. Celestials, 7 of them. Enormous, each one taller than a planet, their armored bodies made of living creation force, their eyes burning with the light of newborn stars. They moved through space with the gravity of what they were, the architects of reality, the builders who had hammered existence into shape at the dawn of time, the beings who had taken the raw materials of the universe and given them form. They had felt the void spreading, felt the darkness consuming what they had built, and they had come, the way they always came when the void overreached, to push it back. The largest of the 7 spoke. Its voice was creation itself, a vibration that assembled matter from nothing in its wake, that left new-formed dust and gas trailing behind the words like shed skin. The language was older than species, older than planets. The words shaped the space they traveled through. The meaning, translated into concepts a former human mind could parse, was simple: return to your boundary. Naruto rose from the planet's surface. Wings of living abyss spread, enormous, stretching beyond the atmosphere, each one visible from the surface as a wing-shaped void across the eclipsed sky. He flew upward, outward, beyond the converted fleet, beyond the orbital debris, beyond the planet's gravitational influence. He rose to meet the Celestials at the edge of the system. The Necrosword emerged. It grew from his hand, extending, lengthening, reaching a size proportional to the beings it was meant to cut. The blade stretched until it matched the Celestials in scale. A weapon the length of a continent, black beyond any black that existed in nature, radiating the anti-presence that had ended beings like these since the first time one had dared to bring its light too close to the dark. The first Celestial raised its hand. From the armored palm, a beam erupted. Creation force in its pure form, the same energy these beings used to ignite stars and shape planetary systems. The beam was the width of a world. It struck toward Naruto with the speed of thought given force. The Necrosword swung. The blade met the beam and split it. Creation force parted around the edge, divided, unable to pass. The pure energy of universal construction finding something it was built to acknowledge. Because the Necrosword had been forged in the shadow of the first celestial Knull had ever slain. Every god-killing stroke since had made it sharper. Every divine being cut had added to its edge. It was the accumulated memory of every time light had met the dark and the dark had won. "I have slain Celestials," Naruto said, and the words traveled across the space between them, carried by the void that filled everything between stars. "You are just a glowing insect." He moved. The wings accelerated him forward, past the beam's divided halves, through the gap the Necrosword had cut, directly toward the first Celestial's chest. He crossed the distance between them in a single instant, and the blade drove forward. Through the armor, through the creation force shell that composed the Celestial's body, through the core of light that burned at its center, the heart of a being that had helped build the universe, the flame that had contributed to the formation of matter and energy and time. The core went dark. The light inside the first Celestial died, extinguished by a blade that had been killing light since before this particular Celestial was assembled. Its enormous form seized, locked in place by the cessation of the energy that animated it. Then it fell. A dead god, drifting in space, its armor going gray, its eyes going dark, the creative force that had sustained it for eons consumed by the blade buried in its chest. Naruto pulled the Necrosword free. The blade hummed at a frequency that shook the local fabric of space. Satisfied, fed, ready, he turned toward the remaining six. They attacked together, 6 Celestials, each one a universe-shaping entity in its own right, coordinated their assault with the unity of beings who had worked together since the first day of creation. Beams of pure creation force from 6 angles, converging on Naruto's position in a net to trap, compress, and unmake anything caught within it. The void compressed. For one instant, 6 creation beams converged on a single point, and the void that occupied that point was squeezed, compressed, forced into a density that should have been impossible. The accumulated creative force of 6 builder gods focusing on a space the size of a human body. The compression lasted half a second. Then the void exploded outward, an eruption of living darkness, expanding from the point of convergence in every direction, swelling with the force of a big bang in miniature. The 6 creation beams were caught in the expanding black, their energy consumed as the void detonated past them, growing, spreading, reaching the Celestials themselves. The darkness struck the second Celestial's arm. The golden armor corroded from the point of contact inward, the creation force shell consumed, the divine material broken down, the Celestial's body compromised in seconds. It tried to sever the arm. Creation force could be reshaped at will, could sacrifice a piece to save the whole. The arm came away, and the void came with it, jumping from severed stump to torso to chest to core. The second Celestial died standing. Its light went out from the center outward, the core consumed first, then the extremities, then the armor. A dead shell drifting beside the first. 3 fell in the next 10 seconds. The void had gained momentum, fed by 2 consumed cores, strengthened by the creative force it had eaten, growing faster and hitting harder. Naruto moved through the remaining Celestials the way the Necrosword moved through everything, without resistance. The blade found cores and ended them. The living abyss found armor and consumed it. Each death fed the next. The 6th Celestial tried to flee. It turned and accelerated, moving at speeds that should have carried it beyond the galaxy in seconds, speeds that only beings who shaped space-time could achieve. The void was faster. A tendril of living darkness, thick as a moon, long as a solar system's radius, lashed outward from the expanding abyss and caught the fleeing celestial by its ankle, pulled it backward into the consuming mass. Its scream was creation force expelled in panic, a blast of pure light that briefly illuminated 100 star systems around it. Then the light went out. The seventh celestial stood alone, the largest, the oldest of the seven. Its armor carried the scars of encounters that predated this universe's current configuration. Marks from the earliest conflicts between light and dark, wounds that had healed and scarred across eons. It looked at Naruto across the space between them, across the field of consumed divine bodies, across the expanding void that now filled the region where its companions had stood. Its eyes, burning with the light of the very first stars it had ignited, met the void black pits with their red spirals. "I was there before the light," Naruto said. The words reached the celestial through the void between them. "And I will be there after it fades." The seventh celestial did something none of the others had done. It reached into itself, into its own core, and withdrew a weapon. A blade of concentrated creation force, forged from the same stuff that stars were made of, burning with the accumulated light of every sun this celestial had ever ignited across its existence. It struck, the creation blade descending toward Naruto with the weight of eons behind it. A blow meant to split the void itself, to drive the darkness back to its boundary, to restore the division between dark and light that had existed since both were young. The Necrosword rose. The blades met. The impact sent shockwaves through the local fabric of space-time. Stars within 1,000 light years of the collision point dimmed, their light momentarily uncertain, pulled between the creative force of the Celestial's blade and the consuming void of the Necrosword. Planets shuddered in their orbits. The divine tree network's closest pathways destabilized, the fabric of the universe itself uncertain about which force to acknowledge as dominant. For one full second, the blades held against each other, creation force pressing against primordial void. The oldest light meeting the oldest dark at the edge of a blade designed to kill exactly this. The Necrosword cut through. The creation blade came apart along the line of contact, splitting from the edge inward, its concentrated light consumed by the weapon that had been drinking such light since before this particular celestial was born. The divine weapon shattered, fragments of pure creation force scattering outward and dimming as they separated from their source. The Necrosword continued its path. Through the broken blade, through the arm that held it, through the chest plate of the largest celestial in the group, through the core of burning light at its center. The seventh celestial's light went out. Its enormous form hung in space, dead, dark, drained. The core consumed, the creative force that had sustained it for longer than most civilizations had existed, eaten by a blade that had been hungry since before hunger was named. 7 dead celestials drifted in the void. 7 bodies the size of planets, dark and empty, their creative force added to the hive. Their accumulated knowledge of reality's architecture, how to build stars, how to shape matter, how to ignite the fundamental forces of existence. All of it became property of the King in Black. Naruto hung among the dead gods. The Necrosword rested at his side, denser, sharpened by what it had cut. The living armor that coated his body rippled with consumed creation force, the energy of beings who built universes, now powering the entity that was unbuilding everything they had made. Below him, far below, across distances that meant nothing to the hive mind, the void continued spreading through the divine tree network. Worlds fell in silence. Civilizations ended without witness. Star systems went dark one by one as the corrupted network reached their local divine trees, and the infection spread from root to surface to population to completion. The hive mind grew, expanded past planetary scale, past system scale, past anything that the beings of the shinobi world could have comprehended. 1 million converted worlds, 1 billion converted minds. Technologies and techniques and powers from every corner of the galaxy, accumulated and cataloged and owned. And still the void spread. Through the network, beyond the network, jumping from world to world through the natural darkness of space itself, no longer needing the divine tree's pathways when the void between stars was already its territory. The darkness moved outward from the center of the consumed empire, at the speed of hunger, at the edge of reality, where the universe ended and the void had always existed beyond. The last coalition formed. They gathered at the boundary, because there was nowhere else left to gather. The surviving gods of the universe, beings who had existed since shortly after the first light, who had watched civilizations rise and fall across millions of years, who had fought the darkness before in the time before memory. Ancient entities whose names had been carved into the foundations of reality by their own hands. Beings of pure creation force, beings of ordered light, beings of divine will so concentrated that their mere presence organized the matter around them, 100 of them. The last 100, everything that remained of the Age of Light's champions, gathered at the universe's edge for a final stand against something they recognized from the oldest stories their kind told each other. They had fought this before. In the beginning, when light and dark first met and the conflict was young, they remembered. They had driven it back once at the cost of half their number and established the boundary that had held for eons. The boundary had broken. They arranged themselves in formation, the same formation they had used at the dawn of time, the same configuration of divine power that had pushed the void back to its proper domain in the age before ages. Their combined output burned against the void's leading edge. Creation force concentrated from 100 sources, directed in a united front against the approaching dark. The void reached them. It came like a tide, a wall of absolute black moving across the universe's floor, consuming stars, consuming worlds, consuming the empty space between them. Every system it crossed went dark. Every world in its path went silent. The living void moved with the inevitability of something returning to a state it had never truly left. Naruto rode the leading edge of the tide. Wings spread, spanning distances that would have taken light centuries to cross. The necrosword blazed with anti-light, consuming even the darkness around it, hungry for something more substantial. The living armor rippled with the accumulated power of a universe half consumed. Celestial energy and divine tree output in 1 billion civilizations, techniques all concentrated in a single form. The 100 remaining gods fired everything, a combined beam of creation force from 100 sources, the total accumulated output of every divine being that still carried light in the universe. It was the most powerful single attack the Age of Light had ever produced, a beam the width of a galaxy, burning with the concentrated will of everything that had ever chosen to stand against the dark. The beam struck the void and pushed, for one moment, one extraordinary, blazing, brilliant moment. The darkness was pushed back. The leading edge of the tide retreated by a fraction. The combined creation force of 100 gods pressing against the void's advance, holding it, stopping it. The boundary between light and dark drawn once again by sheer desperate force. One moment. One blazing moment of defiance, Naruto swung the necrosword, a single horizontal arc. The blade moved through the beam, through the combined output of 100 remaining gods, and cut it. Split the creation force beam down its center, the way a knife splits running water. The divided halves scattered outward, their unity broken, their combined force dispersed into fragments that the void consumed individually. The last coalition felt their unified technique fail, felt the beam split, felt their combined will, their desperate final stand, their ultimate expression of everything the Age of Light represented. Cut in half by a single swing of a sword that had been built to end them, the void surged forward. Through the broken beam, into the space the gods occupied, surrounding them from every direction. The tide rose. The darkness closed. They fought individually. 100 gods, each one ancient beyond measurement, each one carrying power that could reshape reality, fighting alone in the dark against something that consumed them one by one. Their lights flared, brilliant, brief, desperate. Stars born and dying in the void's embrace. One by one, the lights went out. A god of stellar fire blazed with the concentrated heat of 1,000,000 suns and was consumed. The fire eaten, the light extinguished, the divine form hollowed and filled with void. A god of gravitational force compressed space around itself into a barrier of infinite density and found the void already present within the compression. Between the atoms it had pressed together, in the space that existed between everything, waiting. a god of temporal manipulation, tried to reverse the void's advance, rewinding time in its local area, pushing the darkness back to a point before it arrived. Time bent. The void did not move. It had existed before time was invented, and time's reversal moved around it the way water moves around bedrock. A god of pure creation generated matter from nothing, building walls of reality between itself and the approaching dark, erecting barriers of freshly made existence. The void consumed the new-made matter as fast as it appeared, eating creation in real time, consuming the act of making as easily as it consumed what was made. One by one, star by star, god by god. The last divine being in the universe was a creature of primordial light, the very first light, the original illumination that had broken the void's totality at the beginning of time. It was the oldest thing in the universe that was not the void itself, the first spark, the first defiance. It burned with everything it had. The original light, the first thing that had ever opposed the dark, the first act of rebellion against the void's absolute dominion, blazing at maximum intensity. For one final moment, it was beautiful. The last light in a universe going dark, burning against the inevitable, shining into the void one last time. Naruto stood before it, the necrosword in his hand, the void at his back, the entire consumed universe, every world, every star, every god, all of it pressing forward behind him toward this single remaining point of light. The light is an infection, he said. The words carried through the void, traveling across the consumed universe, echoing through every symbiote dragon, through every converted world, through every void black eye that had once belonged to something else. And I am the cure. The necrosword moved. Final, one last cut. The edge that had ended gods since before this universe existed, finding the very first light, the original spark, the beginning of everything that was being ended, and passing through it. The first light went out. The last light in the universe, the primordial illumination that had started everything, that had broken the void's totality billions of years ago and given rise to every star and every life and every moment of every existence since, extinguished by the blade it had given birth to by accident. By shining too bright into the dark and waking something up, silence. The universe was dark, every star, every world, every dimension and pocket reality and divine domain, dark, black. The void reclaimed what it had held before the first light and would hold forever after. The age of creation, everything built between the first spark and the last cut, was over, a parenthetical in the void's eternal sentence. Closed at last, Naruto stood in the completed dark. He stood at what had been the edge of reality and was now simply the void, unbroken, unbounded, stretching in every direction without end. The necrosword rested in his hand, satisfied, full, sleeping at last because there was nothing left for it to cut. The hive mind filled the entirety of existence. Every soul consumed across a universe of conquest. Trillions of minds, each one a converted node in a network that now matched the void itself in scope. Every technique from every civilization, every power from every god, every piece of knowledge that had ever been accumulated across the entire history of light, all of it owned, all of it property of the king in black. The living armor settled against his body. The tendrils that had been reaching outward, hungry, searching, spreading, pulled close and stilled. There was nothing left to reach for, nothing left to consume. The void was complete again, total and absolute and unbroken, the way it had been before the first celestial made its mistake and ignited the first star. The converted Kurama coiled in the darkness, 9 heads, each one enormous, each one bearing void black eyes with red spirals. The first symbiote dragon rested in the completed dark with the satisfaction of a predator that had eaten until fullness. The converted celestials drifted, their dead golden shells now carrying the void's dark, their creative cores replaced by consuming cores, former builders now belonging to the entity that had unbuilt everything they made. The converted Kaguya floated in the void, 3 eyes seeing nothing because there was nothing to see. The progenitor of chakra resting in a universe where chakra's origin had been consumed and its purpose ended. Everything, all of it, every being that had ever carried light, every structure that had ever stood against the dark, every wall and barrier and defense and technique and power and will that had ever been erected in opposition to the void, all of it consumed, all of it owned, all of it returned to the state it held before the first mistake, Naruto turned the necrosword over in his hand once. The blade had no surface for light to catch. There was no light anywhere to catch. It absorbed the nothing around it and was content. The weapon that had killed everything worth killing rested at the end of its purpose, complete, whole. "I was there before the light," he said. The words traveled through the darkness, across everything that existed in all directions, absorbed by every converted world, echoed through every symbiote dragon, carried through every void black eye of every being that belonged to the hive. "And I am here after it fades." The silence that followed was absolute. The silence of a universe returned to the state it held before the first mistake. Before creation, before the infection, the king in black closed his eyes. The red spirals in the void slowed, pulsed once, and the darkness rested as it was always meant to.
Damn, what a ride. The King in Black didn't just end the story, he ended fucking everything. If you felt that void in your soul, smash like, drop a comment with your favorite massacre, and subscribe for more unfiltered madness. The darkness is always watching. Thanks for watching, legends. See you in the next abyss.